Chapter 1131. After a year, Ning Fan, who had finished healing his wounds, finally contacted Taiyuan Du personally and reported the details of the battle that day. At the same time, Ning Fan also received news from Taiyuan Ferry. Today, not only the 11th water route which he was in had been completely conquered, the 2nd, 5th and 7th water routes had also been completely conquered. The 1st, 4th, 8th, 10th, and 12th waterways had also reached their final stages. It would take at least a few months, and at most a year or two at most to recover all of them. Only the 3rd, 6th, and 9th water paths, which were connected to the West, North, and South Heaven domains, were in a stalemate with the foreign races. The battle over there was beginning to reach its climax. It was said that even some of the Deputy Alliance chiefs had been sent to the front lines of the 3rd, 6th, and 9th water paths. Ning Fan took the initiative to request to leave the 11th path and join the battle in the 13th, 6th and 9th paths where the situation was more intense. Unfortunately, his request was rejected by Emperor Tsang. Although the battles in the 3rd, 6th, and 9th paths are intense, the enemy doesn't have many immortal emperors. As long as we spend more time, we'll be able to conquer them. Brother, don't forget that reclaiming the water pass is only the first step of our plan. The reason for the chaos of the foreign clans was that there was a problem with the seal of the Celestial Emperor at the bottom of the river. Once all the water forts are reclaimed, it will be time for me to take action. At that time, I will have no choice but to take the risk and head to the bottom of the river, to the heart of the outsiders, and complete the magnificent feat of repairing the Celestial Emperor's seal. This matter is extremely dangerous. I wonder what little brother has thought about it. Are you willing to participate in this operation? Naturally, he had to participate. Very quickly, Ning Fan gave Emperor Tsang an affirmative answer, making him and the others overjoyed. A man's name is like a tree's shadow. After confirming that Ning Fan was going to join them, everyone's confidence rose by a lot. He could only blame the fact that there were too many people in the Eastern Heaven that he cared about. For this reason alone, no matter how dangerous the operation to repair the Immortal Sovereign's seal was, he would not reject it. He no longer needed to continue considering this matter. When he thought about how he would have to repair the Immortal Sovereign Realm's seal in another 10 years or so, he was no longer in a hurry to go to other waterways to fight against the foreign races. Continuing to improve his strength and increase the success rate of this operation was the most important thing. A few days later, Ning Fan disguised himself as a fish and dived to the bottom of the Realm River. This time, he didn't dive into the water with great fanfare. Instead, he moved stealthily, even deceiving the cultivators in the pass. Since Ning Fan had transformed into a Mount Tai fish to seize the sea-steadying divine needle, and killed the dragon horse crown prince while ignoring the magnetic force of the Realm River, all the members of the foreign races were shocked by his actions. They did not expect that Ning Fan, who was a cultivator of the Eastern Heaven, would have such capabilities. He could move freely at the bottom of the river, and even disguise himself as a member of a foreign race, making it hard for others to recognize him. For a moment, all the major clans of the 11 Paths acted as if they were facing a great enemy. They were afraid that Ning Fan would disguise himself and sneak into the bottom of the river to assassinate the experts of their clans. All the major aquatic clans were on high alert. As soon as Ning Fan entered the water, he noticed this. First of all, there were more outsiders patrolling the bottom of the river. Secondly, when Ning Fan disguised himself as a strange catfish who had returned to his ancestry and wanted to sneak into the strange catfish clan to steal the heavy wood, he was actually forbidden from entering the city by the experts of the clan. The reason was that he looked unfamiliar. During special times, all unfamiliar faces were not allowed to enter the clan grounds. Then Ning Fan disguised himself as the Ice Eye Fish, the Sea Emperor Carp and the Fire Wing Carp. However, those clans were the same as the strange catfish clan. They did not give him a chance to sneak in at all. Obviously, the actual situation of entering the water this time was different from the last time. He could not use the same trick as the last time. Disguising himself as a member of a foreign clan, returning to his ancestry, committing a crime on purpose, controlling the enemy with an illusion technique, and locking him in the underground mineral vein. These were the tricks that Ning Fan used last time. Ghost Face went invisible, The fate-severing sword isolated the heavenly secrets and directly sneaked into the enemy's territory. Then he used an illusion technique to control the clan leader, and found a random excuse to open the underground mineral vein to sneak in. These were the tricks that Ning Fan used this time. One had to admit that the fate-severing sword was very useful. When used together with Ghost Face, none of the sensing formations of the various clans could detect Ning Fan's intrusion. Because he was moving in stealth this time, Ning Fan did not need to specifically choose the clans of fish to invade. As long as it was a force below the Immortal Emperor realm, he would visit all of them. Ning Fan did not steal from the clans of the Immortal Emperor realm. It was because he discovered that the Heavywood mineral vein of the Immortal Emperor realm clans was actually vastly different from the mineral vein of the Immortal Venerables and Immortal Kings clans. For some reason, the Celestial Emperor's sunken wood mine was connected to the Celestial Emperor's seal in the East Jia River. If Ning Fan touches the Heavywood of an Immortal Emperor force, it would probably cause damage to the Immortal Sovereign's seal. Ning Fan had already made up his mind to participate in the operation to repair the Immortal Sovereign's seal. How would he be willing to take the initiative to destroy the seal? The collapse of a 1,000-mile dike can be caused by an ant hole. If the restoration of the Immortal Sovereign's seal failed because of his greed for the 800 million Heavywood from the Immortal Emperor clan, he would not be able to redeem himself even if he died 10,000 times. After weighing the pros and cons, he gave up on the idea of stealing the Immortal Emperor's gloomy Heavywood, and focused on stealing the Immortal Lord's and Immortal King's clans. One day later, Ning Fan retraced his steps and snuck back to the Strange Catfish clan. 3 days later he secretly left the Strange Catfish clan, bringing with him more than 1 million gene of Heavywood and hundreds of pure wood dragons that were condensed from the wood chi of the underground world. On the 4th day, Ning Fan visited the Isai clan, and obtained 94 gene of 800 million Heavywood. On the 7th day, Ning Fan visited the Sea Emperor Carp clan. On the 11th day, Ning Fan visited the Sea Emperor Carp clan. Unlike the last time, because the immemorial lightning cauldron and the flame lightning fire that were of the highest grade were occupied by the 16-heart pill, Ning Fan was not in a hurry to start concocting the pill. Instead, he kept the items in his hands first. In the blink of an eye, 10 months had passed. Ning Fan had robbed more than 100 Immortal Venerables and Immortal King's forces in the entire 11 water paths. Apart from those Immortal Emperor's clans, the remaining 800 million Heavywood had all gone into Ning Fan's hands. When mortals describe their wealth, they would often say that they were as wealthy as a country. Ning Fan felt that he could not say that he was as wealthy as a country. It would be more accurate to say that he was as wealthy as the Eastern Heavens, or even the 4 heavens. After robbing the 11 water paths, he obtained a total of 240,000 gene of 800 million Heavywood. If he uses all of them to concoct the immeasurable pill, it might be enough for all the thought-breaking old monsters in the 4 heavens to break through to the Immortal Venerable realm. After all, a mere 500 immeasurable pills would be enough for an ordinary peak thought-breaking realm expert to break through to the Immortal Venerable realm. Ning Fan, on the other hand, was different. His divine spirit crippled body was too domineering. In the past, he had used tens of thousands of immeasurable pills to allow his cultivation base to break through to the Immortal Venerable realm. Moreover, the effect of the immeasurable pill would be reduced by half every time the cultivator advanced to the next level of the Eternal Ancient realm. It was somewhat similar to the cultivation of the first step of the Void Fragmentation realm. The consumption of immeasurable pills would be greatly increased. In that case, even though Ning Fan had a lot of 800 million Heavywood in his hands, he was not sure to what level his cultivation base would rise to after devouring all of them. Greed was the nature of human beings. Ning Fan was no exception either. Since these 800 million Heavywood were the resources of his enemies, he did not mind being greedy for a little more. How could it be enough to only rob the 11 water paths? Coincidentally, during the 10 months that Ning Fan was robbing, the 12 water paths which were closer to the 11th water path had been completely recovered. Ning Fan made up his mind and directly swam to the 12th water path, and began to steal the Heavywood of the 12 water paths. The amount of Heavywood in the 12th water path was not as much as the 11th water path. In less than 9 months, Ning Fan had already robbed all the immortal venerables and immortal king realm forces of the 12 water paths without anyone noticing. Coincidentally, during these 9 months, the 10th water path had also been completely recovered. The first water path had also been completely recovered. Thus, Ning Fan went to the 10th water path without hesitation and began to steal as much as he could. By the time he finished robbing the 10th water path, other than the 3rd, 6th and 9th water paths, he had already completely recovered all the other water paths. Logically speaking, after Ning Fan finished robbing the 10th water path, he should go to the 9th water path along the way. However, the situation in the 9th water path was a little special. With his boundless rain sense, Ning Fan sensed the presence of quasi-saints in this water path. Moreover, it was not just one but two. Considering that the 9th water path was connected to the southern heaven, its geographical location was especially important. It was not strange for there to be 2 quasi-saints of foreign races to guard it. Since there were quasi-saints guarding this place, Ning Fan did not act recklessly in the 9th water path. He realized that the mineral veins in the 9th water path were being sensed by the 2 quasi-saints. As long as someone opens the underground mineral veins without permission, the 2 quasi-saints would certainly approach them and interrogate them. As such, Ning Fan had no choice but to let go of the 9th water path. He crossed the region and went to the 8th water path to steal as much as he could. After he finished robbing the 8th water path, he went to the 7th water path. When he reached the 6th water path, he realized that there were 6 to 7 quasi-saints there. He became even more cautious. The 6th water path was connected to the northern heaven. The number of quasi-saints in the water path leading to the northern heaven far exceeded the number of quasi-saints in the water path leading to the southern heaven. Rumor had it that the situation in the northern heaven was the most dangerous. Now it seemed like the rumor was not false. Ning Fan bypassed the 6th water path and stole all the quasi-saints in the 5th and 4th water paths. Then he bypassed the 3rd water path, which was guarded by a quasi-saint, and went to the 2nd and 1st water paths. When Ning Fan returned to the Lingyun Pass after robbing the entire eastern border river, it had already been 11 years since he dived into the border river for the second time. The total amount of 800 million yin heavy wood in the profound yin world had reached a terrifying 220,000 jin. This amount of yin heavy wood was enough to make all the quasi-saints in the 4 heavens move out to rob him. Ning Fan knew the severity of the matter. He would never let anyone know about this matter. He was not a saint. He would not share these 800 million yin heavy wood with the cultivators of the eastern heaven. It was because he knew that no matter how righteous the eastern heaven's cultivators were, they still had their own selfish motives. As the ancients said, friends can go through thick and thin together, but they cannot share riches and honor together. As the saying goes, great kindness is also great enmity. The great war was imminent. If he shares a large amount of 800 million yin heavy wood with the other cultivators of the eastern heaven, what he would gain would not be gratitude but the greed and schemes of countless people. The alliance of the border river, which was originally united against the outsiders, might even fall apart because of the temptation of a large amount of 800 million yin heavy wood. Even if it was the 2 divine void emperors or old devil bai, which one of them did not need immeasurable pills in their cultivation process. To those existences, a small amount of immeasurable pills might not be enough to attract their attention. However, a large amount of immeasurable pills would be enough to pave their path to the quasi-saint realm. Who knows what they would do if they find out about this matter? 11 years have passed. Those few incense flame slaves seem to have almost finished concocting my 16-heart pill. In that case, I can free up the immemorial lightning cauldron and the flame lightning fire to concoct the immeasurable pill. There's one more thing which is very troublesome. Even though I have a large amount of 800 million yin heavy wood with me, it's not enough to concoct the immeasurable pill. I still need other medicinal ingredients. When he thought of this, Ning Fan suddenly felt a headache. This is really a happy worry. Where am I going to get the same amount of other medicinal ingredients? The eastern heaven certainly can't plunder so many medicinal ingredients. It probably won't even be enough to make up for the small change. As expected, I can only rely on the ancient country trading formation. Ning Fan got in touch with the old man from the heaven-piercing sect through the ancient country trading formation. Unfortunately, the other party could not fulfill his request this time. Sigh. It's difficult. It's too difficult. The amount of medicinal ingredients that fellow Taoist needs is too huge. Each of them actually needs a few 100,000 jin. The warehouse of my sect doesn't have so much stock at all. It's hard to even make up for the small change. You should know that all the stock had been bought by a large sect from a certain true world in one go. Besides, even if there are enough medicinal ingredients, the price of such a large amount of medicinal ingredients will not be lower than 10,000 gold. To be honest with fellow Taoist, my position in the sect isn't considered high. My authority is rather limited. I've already given up my face to help fellow Taoist pay a few hundred gold on credit. If it's a transaction of more than 10,000 gold, forgive me for not being able to. The old man's tone was very honest. He really did not have the ability to help Ning Fan write an IOU of 10,000 gold. After hearing his words, Ning Fan also felt deeply helpless. He sighed and did not force the old man to do such a thing which was obviously beyond his ability. Speaking of which, this matter was really too ridiculous. When other people concoct the immeasurable pill, they would lack the hardest to find 800 million yin heavy wood. Ning Fan, on the other hand, did not lack yin heavy wood. Instead, he lacked various kinds of cheap materials. The old man was originally sighing. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and said happily, "By the way, I have a piece of information here. Perhaps it can help fellow Taoist." Fellow Taoist, do you still remember the second method of using our sect's trading formation? Ning Fan pondered for a moment and answered, "Of course I do." On one hand, the ancient country trading formation allows one to directly purchase goods from the heaven-reaching sect. On the other hand, it also allows one to conduct private transactions with the cultivators from the outside world. However, I remember that fellow Taoist once mentioned that if cultivators conduct private transactions, they will face a huge risk because they are avoiding the power of the ancient country scale. About 1/3 of the transactions will fail due to the turbulence of time and space, resulting in a loss of both goods and money. The old man said, "That's right. It is indeed very risky for cultivators to conduct private transactions. However, it seems like this is the only way to help fellow Taoists gather the materials for concocting the pill. From what I see, fellow Taoist is buying these medicinal materials to concoct the immeasurable pill. Am I right? Moreover, the amount of each of the medicinal materials that fellow Taoist is collecting is extremely huge. However, you are not collecting the most precious 800 million yin heavy wood. I reckon that fellow Taoist must have a large amount of 800 million yin heavy wood in your hands. Am I right?" Ning Fan said, "That's right." The old man said, "Forgive me for asking, but how much 800 million yin heavy wood does fellow Taoist have? If it is more than 100,000 jin, I have a business that will definitely make a profit. I am willing to provide it to fellow Taoist. It can solve your urgent problem." Ning Fan said, "Oh, I would like to hear the details." The old man said, "It's like this. In a certain high-grade illusionary world, a senior incipient saint posted a request for goods to our sect. She needs at least 100,000 jin of 800 million yin heavy wood." After hearing what the old man said, Ning Fan smiled bitterly and said, "I don't plan to sell the 800 million yin heavy wood in my hands." He planned to keep them for himself to improve his cultivation base. Why would he sell them for money? Is he stupid? The old man said, "That's not true. It's not an ordinary sale. Since the senior incipient saint is willing to barter with me, she seems to have a large amount of finished immeasurable pills in her hands. It turns out that she is going to use them to exchange for the 800 million yin heavy wood." Ning Fan's eyes lit up. "Barter with me? If I directly exchange the yin heavy wood for her finished immeasurable pills, not only can I save myself the trouble of collecting other medicinal materials, but I can also save a lot of time in pill concoction. This is a good deal. However, I don't know what is the ratio of the other party. With Ning Fan's pill concoction technique, 1 jin of 800 million yin heavy wood could probably produce 2 immeasurable pills. Of course, if he accumulates experience through a large amount of concoction, there should be room for his success rate to increase, and he could produce 3 pills for 1 jin of wood. Considering the risks of the transaction, the cost of the other medicinal materials, and the time needed for pill concoction. As long as the price offered by the other party reaches 2 pills for 1 gene of wood, he would be willing to carry out this transaction. If the ratio is lower than this, he would have to consider it carefully. The old man said, "Don't worry, fellow Taoist. Since I said that this transaction will definitely be profitable, the ratio will certainly satisfy fellow Taoist. The other party is willing to exchange for immeasurable pills for 1 gene of Een heavy wood. For every 50,000 gene of Een heavy wood that fellow Taoist offers, that senior is willing to increase the ratio by 1 more pill." In other words, if Ning Fan is carrying out a transaction of 220,000 gene of Een heavy wood, the ratio would be 1 to 5. This ratio was much higher than what he expected in his heart. Even if he loses a third of the immeasurable pills that he would get in the end, the ratio would still be more than 1 to 3. It was just too worth it. The old man continued, "That senior has another purpose for purchasing 800 million pieces of Een heavy wood. That's why he's willing to use the immeasurable pills that he doesn't need for this transaction. If fellow Taoist is interested in this transaction, I can tell you the contact method of that senior, and help fellow Taoist contact that senior. She will then activate the ancient country's transaction formation, and wait for fellow Taoist to contact her. Thank you again." A few days later, Ning Fan contacted the old man from the heaven-reaching cult through the ancient country's transaction formation. He learned that the senior had already taken some time out, and was currently waiting for Ning Fan to contact him through the formation. Hence, Ning Fan switched to another ancient country's transaction formation that specialized in private transactions. He entered the address of that senior in the ancient country's address into the formation. The myriad worlds in the heavens were just an imaginary number. The number of worlds in this world was originally endless, and it was hard to see the edge of it. If Ning Fan did not know the other party's address, the difficulty of completing the structure of the ancient country's transaction formation would be no less than searching for a speck of dust in the entire eastern heaven. Knowing the address was much easier. Ning Fan was unwilling to reveal his address in the illusionary world. However, the other party did not seem to have such concerns. The address that was marked was Little Mountain World. Behind it was a long string of coordinates. According to the old man from the heaven-reaching cult, the Little Mountain World seemed to be a high-grade illusionary world that could nurture saints. Judging from this, the illusionary world that Ning Fan was staying in was definitely not a high-grade illusionary world. After all, it could not give birth to a saint. Ding ding ding, that it was the sound of the ancient country's transaction formation connecting the two parties. Before Ning Fan could say anything, a gentle and pleasant female voice came from the other end of the ancient country's transaction formation. "Hello." The other party greeted him politely. A woman. Ning Fan was stunned. He only knew that the person who wanted to trade with him was a senior at the incipient saint realm. He did not know that it was a woman. Is there anything wrong with a woman? The woman in front of him seemed to be a little displeased. However, even if she was displeased, she still behaved politely. She was neither anxious nor annoyed. It seemed like she was not really angry. Ning Fan knew that he was being rude and apologized. "I'm sorry." He did not explain much. After all, it was just a transaction of fate. After the transaction, they would probably part ways. Chapter 1132. Ning Fan did not have the intention to have a deep conversation with that female saint. The other party also did not seem to want to talk to him in case they were involved in some karma. Ning Fan's understanding of her was limited to the name of her plane, and the VIP code name she used in the Heaven-Reaching sect. Ning Fan was a bronze-level VIP of the Heaven-Reaching sect. The code name he used during the transaction was Fox of Slaughter. As for the other party, she was a silver-level VIP with the code name Miss Ling. When she found out that Ning Fan actually had 220,000 gene of 800 million Een heavy wood, Miss Ling was obviously a little excited. "Fellow Taoist, can you transfer all of your Een heavy wood to me? I'm willing to give you 55 low-grade immeasurable pills for each gene of wood." 55 pills? Ning Fan was surprised. Initially, he thought that it would be considered a success if the transaction could reach a ratio of 1 to 50. He did not expect that the other party would directly offer such a high ratio. What? Does fellow Taoist think that this ratio is too low? I don't know about the situation in your plane. However, in my plane, this price is already a few times higher than the market price. If it wasn't because I urgently need this item, it would be impossible for me to offer such a high price. Ning Fan could vaguely feel that Miss Ling, who was in another plane, seemed to be frowning at this moment. She explained with a bitter smile. No, this ratio is not low. It is exactly because the ratio is a little high that I am surprised. Let's trade at this ratio. Send me some wood first. I want to test the quality of the wood, the other party said again. I see. Ning Fan nodded and used the ancient country trading formation to send 10 sets of wood consecutively to the little mountain world. Each set was 1 jin. Fellow Taoist is really interesting. I only need to test 1 set of wood, but you actually sent me 9 sets of wood. I suppose this is your first time making a private transaction with someone, right? Are you testing the probability of the goods being devoured by the spatial turbulence? Miss Ling smiled. She was a saint who was as shrewd as the ocean. She could naturally tell what Ning Fan was thinking. Ning Fan did not deny it. He smiled and admitted Miss Ling's guess. Inwardly, he was a little moved by the result of the test. 9 sets? Out of 10 sets of wood, 9 of them were actually successfully transferred. The success rate is really high. It actually reached 90%. According to the heaven-reaching sect, if ordinary people do not use the ancient country scale to trade goods, 1/3 of the goods would usually be devoured by the spatial turbulence. Ning Fan did not know whether his teleportation success rate was close to 90% or it was due to luck. It would be fine if it was just a coincidence. However, if the success rate of a private transaction was really affected by luck, then he had a bold idea and wanted to try it out. Most of the 10,000 ancient immortal venerables only had 1 or 2 colors of immortal luck. Ning Fan, on the other hand, already had 5 colors of immortal luck. Among those who were at the same level as him, he was definitely in existence with heaven-defying luck. Of course, because he had killed quite a number of immortal emperors recently, his luck was actually even more heaven-defying. Oh, the quality of the goods was quite good. Since that was the case, the transaction could begin. 220,000 kilograms of goods is a little too much. How about this? We'll trade in batches. For every 500 kilograms of wood that fellow Taoist sends me, I'll send you 55,000 immeasurable pills. As for the issue of receiving goods, he would follow the customs of the ancient countries. If the goods fellow Taoist sends out are swallowed by the spatial turbulence, you will have to bear the losses yourself and restock the goods. In other words, the amount of wood that fellow Taoist can send to me in the end will definitely not be more than 220,000 kilograms. I will only pay for the goods in this area. Similarly, if fellow Taoist does not receive the pills that I send out, I will have to restock them. Ning Fan had already asked the sky-reaching sect about these customs. He did not have any objections to these terms. Moreover, if the ancient country's transaction formation was successful, it would emit a formation light to alert the formation master. With this advantage, he did not have to worry about the other party hiding the goods after receiving them. However, before he truly transacted with Miss Ling, Ning Fan still had some things he wanted to confirm. Thus, he was not in a hurry to start the transaction. Instead, he took out some useless items from his storage pouch and sent them to Miss Ling through the ancient country's transaction formation. The first step was medicinal pills. 10 bottles were sent out and 8 bottles arrived at Little Mountain Jia. 10 postnatal talismans were sent out and 9 arrived at Little Mountain Jia. 10 million-year-old spirit herbs were sent out and 8 arrived at Little Mountain Jia. 10 stones that were picked up from the ground at Lingyan Pass were sent out and 9 arrived at Little Mountain Jia. 10 grasses that were randomly plucked from the ground were sent out and 8 arrived at Little Mountain Jia. 10 drops of river water from the Jia River. 10 tattered storage pouches. When Miss Ling received Ning Fan's junk one after another, she could not help but feel speechless even with her cultivation and self-restraint of the 6 epochs reincarnation realm. Is this fellow Taoist slaughter fox playing with the ancient country's transaction formation? Or is this fellow Taoist slaughter fox still testing the probability of the appearance of the spatial turbulence? However, it would cost a large amount of heavenly Dao gold and silver every time he sent the goods to other planes without going through the ancient country scale. Moreover, he would need to pay some commission to the sky-reaching sect for the goods to be directly received by the formation. It could be said that even if Ning Fan's goods were junk, he would still need to spend a lot of money for each teleportation. Miss Ling did not know how long Ning Fan was going to carry out the test. She had great self-restraint and would not act like a bad person. She interrupted Ning Fan's test and patiently waited for the test to end so that he could start the transaction. In the end, Ning Fan spent nearly 100 gold coins to send hundreds of junk to Little Mountain Jia and sorted out some data. A large amount of statistical data showed that his success rate of sending goods was indeed higher than ordinary people. It could actually stabilize at around 80%. Among people with the same luck, his cultivation base was the lowest. However, among people with the same cultivation base, his luck far surpassed them. This point was indeed helpful for him to carry out private transactions in ancient countries. When others carry out private transactions in different worlds, the failure rate was as high as 1/3. However, his failure rate was only around 20%. If his luck increases a little more compared to the original foundation, the failure rate should be able to be lowered. As he thought of this, Ning Fan smiled faintly and made up his mind. Suddenly, he released the seal on his body and completely released the luck that he had been suppressing for a long time. In the past, during the Emperor conferring ceremony, Ning Fan had integrated the heaven-defying ability, Big Dipper Reversal, into the cross-shaped halo. From then on, even if he did not actively use Big Dipper Reversal, he could still devour the enemy's luck when he kills someone with the cross-shaped halo. In the Dark Race, Ning Fan had killed an immortal emperor of the Dark Race. On the Realm River, he had killed a large number of immortal emperors of the foreign races. Any one of those immortal emperors had the peerless luck of a 7th-colored immortal emperor. Every time Ning Fan killed an immortal emperor, the cross-shaped halo would automatically devour the opponent's luck and return the huge amount of luck to Ning Fan's body. From the 5-colored immortal emperor to the 6-colored immortal emperor, he would need to devour around 10 6-colored cultivators. From the 6-colored immortal emperor to the 7-colored immortal emperor, he would need to devour around 10 7-colored cultivators. The number of immortal emperors that Ning Fan had killed had already exceeded this number. At this moment, he released all the luck that he had accumulated for a long time and integrated it into his umbrella of luck. The level of his luck immediately began to skyrocket. After 100 breaths, the level of Ning Fan's luck broke through from the 5-colored immortal emperor to the 6-colored immortal emperor. Another 100 breaths later, Ning Fan's umbrella of luck had turned into the 7-colored immortal emperor. There was even a trace of the 8th color. Basically, only immortal emperors were qualified to have 7-colored luck. Only the quasi-sages in the 4 heavens could cultivate a sliver of the 8th color after the 7-colored true qi. To put it bluntly, the current level of Ning Fan's luck had already surpassed the 7th generation Sha Di, and was on par with the quasi-saints of the 4 heavens. Such a level of luck had actually appeared on an immortal venerate of 10,000 ancient times. It was imaginable how much luck this immortal venerate had. After his luck broke through, Ning Fan spent tens of gold coins to conduct the second round of teleportation test. The result shocked him. In total, he had teleported more than 200 pieces of junk. Only 3 of them were devoured while the rest of them successfully reached the Little Mountain World. His teleportation success rate was actually close to 99%. It was a success rate that ordinary people could not imagine. Ning Fan nodded his head in satisfaction. Now he could conduct the transaction with Miss Ling. Eventually, out of the 220,000 gene of wood that Ning Fan sent out, only 3,000 gene of them failed. The rest of them all reached the Little Mountain World. Even though Miss Ling had the experience of the 6 epochs reincarnation, she was still shocked by Ning Fan's heaven-defying luck. A success rate that was close to 99%. How enviable! After receiving the goods he needed to pay. According to the actual number of goods he received, Miss Ling needed to pay Ning Fan a total of 1.2 million low-grade immeasurable pills. Her luck was just above average among the incipient Saint Realm experts of the same level as her. Thus, the success rate of the transaction in the ancient country could only be stabilized at around 75%. Compared to all the other transaction participants, it was already considered a good success rate. However, if it is compared to Ning Fan's success rate, it would be somewhat unsightly. After more than 400,000 pills were devoured by the spatial turbulence, Miss Ling finally finished giving out the pills and ended the transaction with Ning Fan. With her personality, she would never talk nonsense with a stranger. However, this time, before the transaction ended, she asked Ning Fan a question out of curiosity. You aren't an incipient Saint Realm expert, are you? As soon as the words left her mouth, Miss Ling felt that it was inappropriate, and she felt a little embarrassed. Inquiring about the other party's cultivation base and background was the biggest taboo in the transaction of an ancient country. The reason why the transaction of an ancient country could be trusted by the myriad of worlds was because of its confidentiality and reliability. I'm sorry. I misspoke. Just as Miss Ling was about to apologize to Ning Fan, she heard a hearty laughter coming from the other side. It was a very young laughter. It did not seem to have the vicissitudes of life left behind by the death of Samsara, as expected. This fox of slaughter is not a saint, right? That's right. I'm not a saint. If it's not a transaction of an ancient country but a face-to-face exchange, I'm afraid I would have to call Miss Ling Sr. However, it's a pity that the world plane I'm in is too far away from the little mountain world. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to meet you face-to-face in this lifetime and call you Senior. He actually answered this question seriously. Miss Ling was stunned. Then she pursed her lips and chuckled. She said that they would meet again if fate wills it. Then, she turned off the ancient country's transaction formation and ended the communication with Ning Fan. She did not look down on Ning Fan just because he was not a saint. She just admired Ning Fan a lot. Even though he was not a saint, he could still get his hands on such a large amount of 800 million yen heavy wood. Besides, his luck was also unparalleled among those at the same level as him. Even if he was not a saint now, there was a high chance that he would advance to the third step in the future. However, the myriad of worlds in the heavens were so vast. Even a saint might not be able to meet each other. The two of them probably would not meet each other again. Thus, Miss Ling did not keep this transaction in her mind. In the profound Yin world, Ning Fan's eyes were filled with joy. He looked at the immeasurable pills that were piled up like a mountain in front of him. 500 immeasurable pills were enough to make an ancient immortal venerable. He had 1,200,000 immeasurable pills with him. If he only creates immortal venerables in the Eastern Heaven, it would be enough for him to create more than 2,000 new immortal venerables. With such a large amount of pills, even if the degenerate divine spirit body devours most of the medicinal power of the pills, it would still be enough for his cultivation base to skyrocket. As for how strong his cultivation base would be, it would still depend on the pills he consumes in the future. Due to Ning Fan's amazing luck, the result of the transaction this time could be said to be perfect. Not long after the transaction ended, Ning Fan received another piece of good news. He had successfully concocted the 16-heart pill. When Ning Fan entered the incense flame realm, what he saw were 6 pill refinement masters who no longer looked like human beings. They offered the 16-heart pill to Ning Fan, as if they were presenting a treasure. In order to ensure the success rate of concocting the 16-heart pill, the 6 of them did not hesitate to destroy their own Tao of pill and fuse their medicine souls into the pills. The price they paid could not be said to be small. Among them, 4 of them had destroyed their own medicine souls, and their cultivation base had fallen to the 9th revolution of the gold grade forever. As for the other 2, their medicine souls were also greatly damaged. The foundation of their medicine souls was severely injured, and they could no longer make any progress in their medicine souls for the rest of their lives. These 6 people were the disciples of the immortal emperors of the Supreme Pill Sacred Region. They used to be Ning Fan's enemies. Ning Fan would never sympathize with his enemies. However, he had always kept his promises. Since these 6 people had helped him concoct the 16-heart pill, he would return them their freedom. When he goes to the Supreme Pill Sacred Region again in the future, he would naturally let these 6 people go. After getting Ning Fan's promise, the 6 of them were overjoyed. They felt that their efforts in the past 10+ years were not in vain. Thus, they naturally thanked Ningfan profusely. Ningfan kept the immemorial lightning cauldron and the flame lightning fire. Then he returned to the profound Yin world to prepare for his future cultivation. With the endurance of his crippled divine spirit body, Ningfan could use the most domineering method to forcefully refine the heavenly ingredients and earthly treasures when he refines them. It would take him very little time. Other people might need tens of thousands of years to refine these pills, but he was confident that he could complete it within a few decades. The only thing he needed to consider was how to distribute the limitless pills and the 16-heart pill. The cultivation base of the 16-heart pill did not increase a fixed amount of magic power. The effects of consuming the pill would be different depending on the cultivation realm of the cultivator. There were 2 ways to consume the 16-heart pill. The first way was for the ancient devil cultivator, who had the lowest cultivation base, to consume the pill, allowing his cultivation base to directly rise to the 4th heavenly layer of ancestral reversion. The second way was for the divine, demon or devil cultivator to consume the pill after breaking through to the 4th tribulation immortal king realm, and continue to break through to the 5th tribulation immortal king realm. Ningfan originally planned to weigh the pros and cons of the 2 methods carefully. However, when he discovered a certain matter, he rejected both plans. He realized that Jieshue's cultivation base, which he could not find a way to improve, was actually responding to the 16-heart pill. This pill seemed to be able to improve Jieshue's cultivation base. The cultivation bases of the ancient gods, ancient demons and ancient devils can all be improved through the limitless pill. Jieshue's cultivation base is the only one that I can't find a way to improve. In the past, Jieshue was my strength while the cultivation bases of the gods, demons and devils were my weakness. Today, the cultivation bases of the 4 elements have achieved a balance. However, this balance cannot last forever. If Jieshue's cultivation base remains stagnant, it will become the weakness of my cultivation base in the future. It wasn't easy for me to find an item that can improve Jieshue's cultivation base. If I use it to improve the cultivation bases of the gods, demons and devils, it will be too wasteful. However, there is one thing that I am very concerned about. Why is this 16-heart pill the only one among all the heavenly ingredients and earthly treasures that can improve Jieshue's cultivation base? If I can understand the key to this, I might be able to find a way to continue cultivating Jieshue's cultivation base. For a moment, Ningfan fell into deep thought. 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye. To ordinary ancient cultivators, 10 years was a very short period of time. Even 100,000 years would not be enough to improve their cultivation base by much unless they experienced a great opportunity. Ningfan, however, was different. In these 10 years, he had refined all the medicinal power of the 16-heart pill, and his cultivation base had improved tremendously. A tribulation spirit of a royal family was comparable to a sage. A 3-star true blood realm was comparable to an ancient immortal venerable. 10 years ago, Ningfan's Jieshue's cultivation base was at the 3-star true blood realm. 10 years later, his Jieshue's cultivation base had been breaking through continuously and finally reached the 4-star true blood realm. A 4-star true blood grand firmament tribulation spirit was roughly equivalent to an existence that was above average among 4th tribulation immortal kings. It could be said that from the moment Ningfan broke through to the 4-star true blood realm, he could no longer be considered as an ancient immortal venerable. Instead, he had truly entered the immortal king realm. Even though the density of his magic power in the past had already surpassed many 4th tribulation immortal kings, he could only be considered as possessing the true immortal king realm at this moment. Is this the power of a 4-star true blood realm? Feeling the tribulation sense that kept gushing out of his body, Ningfan was extremely satisfied. After stabilizing himself for a while, he threw himself into the 2nd round of cultivation. He began to consume the measureless pill. First was the ancient devil's cultivation. After consuming more than 20,000 infinity pills, the ancient devil's cultivation naturally broke through to the 1st ancestral awakening realm. With 500 tribulation energy, one could become a newly advanced immortal venerable. 1,000 tribulation magic power could make one a 1st tribulation immortal venerable. Only with 2,000 tribulation magic power, could one break through to the second tribulation immortal venerable realm. Every time the primordial realm advanced a level, it required double the amount of immeasurable pills to increase the same amount of magic power as before. As such, Ningfan consumed another 80,000 immeasurable pills before his ancient devil cultivation base broke through to the second heavenly layer of ancestral returning realm. After consuming another 160,000 elixirs, the ancient gods and ancient demons broke through to the second eternal tribulation. After that, Ningfan began to use all his strength to break through the bottleneck of the immortal king realm. To him, he would need about 320,000 immeasurable pills to break through to the third tribulation realm. Logically speaking, he only had 940,000 immeasurable pills left. It might be enough for 2 of his cultivation bases to break through to the third tribulation realm. But it would be a little difficult for him to break through to the third tribulation realm at the same time. However, due to an unexpected gain, the number of immeasurable pills that Ningfan needed to break through to the third tribulation realm was greatly reduced. As a result, he actually managed to break through to the third tribulation realm at the same time. At this point, the cultivation bases of the divine, demon and devil tribulations realms had all advanced to the immortal king realm. The divine, demon and devil tribulations realms each had the magic power of 3,000 tribulations. When added together, it would be 9,000 tribulations. In terms of the density of his magic power, Ningfan could already be compared to a 9-tribulation immortal emperor with just his divine, demon and devil tribulations realms. Taking the tribulation blood's cultivation base into consideration, the total amount of his magic power was about 13,500 tribulations. What kind of concept was this level of magic power? One should know that the threshold of a quasi-saint realm's magic power was just 10,000 tribulations. The density of Ningfan's magic power was already comparable to some first-level quasi-saints. Ningfan's cultivation of 4 elements at the same time finally began to shine. Of course, at the level of a quasi-saint, the density of one's magic power was no longer the most important standard to measure one's strength. Abilities, magic treasures, the position of a quasi-saint and a series of other factors were the standard to measure whether a quasi-saint was strong or not. Ningfan's current magic power was enough to ensure that he would have an absolute advantage when facing 9 tribulation immortal emperors and half-step quasi-saints during the age of Dharma decline. However, if his opponent is a first-level quasi-saint, Ningfan would still be no match for him. If he fights them one-on-one, he would probably lose 9 out of 10 battles. Even if he did not lose, he would at most end up in a draw. However, this was already enough to make Ningfan happy. At least the current him already possessed the strength to threaten a quasi-saint. It could be said that he had been reborn. There were 2 other pieces of good news that made Ningfan happy. Firstly, the problem of his crippled divine spirit body was officially solved. Secondly, his cultivation of the yin-yang Tao of wood had made great progress. Previously, because of the tyrannical nature of his crippled divine spirit body, a large amount of medicinal power would be forcibly taken away from him when he consumed the immeasurable pills to complete a certain evolution of his crippled divine spirit body. Under the nourishment of 1,200,000 immeasurable pills, the evolution of his crippled divine spirit body was finally completed. In the future, it would no longer affect Ningfan's absorption of medicinal power. Due to the sudden change at the end of his cultivation, Ningfan, who could only advance 2 types of cultivation bases to the immortal king realm, instantly had enough pills. In the end, his 3rd type of cultivation base also advanced to the immortal king realm. The evolution of his crippled divine spirit body did not make Ningfan directly evolve into a postnatal divine spirit. Instead, while greatly increasing the strength of his spirit body, it gathered the divine power in his body and formed his unique, divine lattice. If Ningfan wants to become a postnatal divine spirit, he would need to find a way to continuously strengthen his divine lattice. What is a divine lattice? If one must put it in a nutshell, a divine lattice is just like the sovereign immortal emperor's divine seat. No, this analogy is not accurate. Because in Ningfan's point of view, all living beings in this world are actually imitating the cultivation of ancient divine spirits. First, there were divine spirits. Then there were immortal spirits. After that, there were cultivators in the myriad of worlds in the heavens. Immortal spirits imitated divine spirits and nurtured their immortal lattice. As for their descendants, they imitated their immortal lattice and cultivated to the sovereign immortal realm. Ningfan did not know about this at first. However, at the moment he condensed his divine lattice, many memories of divine spirits related to the divine lattice appeared in his mind. They were the blessings of the divine ancestors that every divine spirit who condensed their divine lattice would receive. Ningfan had obtained a preliminary divine lattice. Currently, his divine lattice was completely blank. He needed to fill it with something in order to make it improve continuously. In that case, he must mention the cultivation of the wood yin-yang technique. To put it bluntly, the cultivation of the 27 yin-yang technique was to cultivate to the sovereign immortal realm step by step. Great Emperor Ancient Chaos did that, but Ningfan did not. The biggest difference between him and Great Emperor Ancient Chaos was that he was a divine spirit and he possessed the most orthodox cultivation method in the world. Since he already had a divine lattice, why would he still cultivate to the sovereign immortal realm, which was a few levels lower than his divine lattice? In the past, when Ningfan stole the yin heavy wood, he would capture the wood dragons that had been accumulated in the mines for countless years whenever he went to a mine. Just like that, while he harvested 220,000 yin of wood, he also harvested hundreds of thousands of wood dragons that were incomparably pure. After Ningfan devoured all of the wood dragons, his wood yin-yang technique's cultivation base skyrocketed from the small accomplishment sovereign immortal realm all the way to the mid-stage of the sovereign immortal realm. Cultivators at the mid-stage of the sovereign immortal realm could nurture the void of the sovereign immortal realm. However, there was another problem. In order to condense the void of the sovereign immortal realm, he would need to use some special methods. For example, the eye-opening technique, the Tao fruit of the sovereign immortal realm, the heartless technique, and so on. At first, Ningfan was still studying the method to truly cultivate the void of the sovereign immortal realm and become a heaven-defying immortal king who possessed the sovereign immortal realm. Soon, however, he realized that he was overthinking. Yes, the reason why divine spirits were useless was that they did not snatch the medicinal power of his pills. It was time for a change of taste. It actually devoured the void of the sovereign immortal realm which Ningfan had just condensed. Ningfan was petrified on the spot. After devouring the embryonic form of the void of the sovereign immortal realm, Ningfan's divine lattice had evolved once again into the wood divine lattice. If it was in the prosperous era of ancient divine spirits, it wouldn't be a big deal for a cultivator to awaken his divine lattice. There were at least 8,000 divine spirits who awakened the same type of divine lattice. Among the divine spirits of the same divine lattice, the one with the strongest divine lattice would be blessed by the god ancestor and become the father god or mother god of that type of divine lattice. However, was this the era where divine spirits were flourishing? It was the era where all divine spirits had gone extinct. It was unknown how many divine spirits were still existing in this world. It was even harder to tell how many of them had cultivated the wood divine lattice. In the end, it was amazing. The moment Ningfan obtained the wood divine lattice, the god ancestor blessed him, causing a lot of memories of the divine spirits to appear in the depths of his sea of consciousness. Those memories included the records of all the wood father god and wood mother god since the birth of the god ancestor, and in the endless reincarnations. With great glory, Ningfan became the 9122nd father god of wood. At the same time when he obtained this title, his body gained a divine spirit talent called palmwood. This was the second divine spirit talent that Ningfan had. It did not sound domineering at all, but it contained the power to rule the world. At this moment, all the plants and living beings in the world became Ningfan's servants. At this moment, Ningfan was the father of all plants in the world. He could give life to all plants or take away their lives. Only when another divine spirit who possessed the wood divine lattice issued a divine challenge to Ningfan and succeeded in the challenge could he take away Ningfan's title. Otherwise, as long as Ningfan did not die, all the plants in the world would have to obey his command. What did this mean? It meant that even if Taoist Musang had the cultivation base of a second-level quasi-saint realm expert, his wood master position would be destroyed by Ningfan in an instant and his cultivation base would go down the drain. This was the height of wood that Taoist Musang could not achieve in his entire life. This was also a height that even great Emperor Ancient Chaos could not reach. If it was the era of divine spirits, a divine spirit with a crippled body who was not even an innate divine spirit would definitely not have the right to become the god ancestor. A divine spirit that was destroyed by the era. The era created Ningfan. Ningfan did not know that the moment he obtained the title of god ancestor, the three great true worlds outside of the countless world planes were greatly shaken. In any case, no one in the illusionary world where he resided would notice this. As for the completion of the god ancestor's lattice, it meant that Ningfan had finally ended his 40 years of cultivation. Yes, he had been in seclusion for more than 40 years. Including the 11 years he spent to steal the heavywood. 50 years had passed since the battle that year. The situation in the Realm River had undergone tremendous changes during these 50 years. After walking out of the profound world and returning to the Lingyun Pass, the first thing Ningfan did was to ask about the current situation in the Realm River. What surprised him was that the 3rd, 6th and 9th water paths had yet to be fully recovered even after dozens of years had passed. All of them were stuck at the last main pass, unable to conquer it. It was no wonder that after so many years, Emperor Tsong and the others still did not summon him to repair the immortal sovereign's seal. It turned out that they had yet to achieve the prerequisite to repair the seal. Currently, each of the 3rd, 6th and 9th water paths was guarded by no less than 10 immortal emperors of foreign races. In the past, in order to pursue and kill Ningfan, the 10 paths of heaven had used up most of their immortal emperors' quotas. Dozens of years had passed, and the quota had been restored. Dozens of immortal emperors came out. However, the reason why these immortal emperors came out of the water was no longer to kill Ningfan. Instead, they had a more important purpose to achieve. They needed to concentrate their forces in the 3rd, 6th, and 9th route to eliminate the Eastern Sky Alliance's forces. During the tens of years when Ningfan was in seclusion, the Realm River Alliance army suffered heavy casualties. Around 60% of their cultivators died in the Realm River. Nearly half of the immortal venerables and immortal kings had perished. Even a few immortal thearchs had perished. The lightning immortal Tao companion had both died in battle. The great emperor was captured by the outsiders, and after he was killed, his corpse was refined into a puppet. Grand Emperor Shen Kong of Godly Void Pavilion was ambushed by an immortal emperor of a foreign race, and his cultivation level dropped to a 7 tribulation immortal emperor. Great Emperor Zhen Yuan died in battle. Madame Guihua had betrayed him. Dongling immortal father had betrayed them. Great Emperor Iron Li died a miserable death. When his subordinates told Ningfan about these grievous news, the joy he felt from his cultivation base improving was diluted. His heart was filled with a heavy feeling. Just when he was immersed in his cultivation, when he knew nothing about the outside world, so many figures were buried here. He could no longer see his lightning immortal Tao companion, and great Emperor Jihua, who fought side by side with him in the past. What made Ningfan even angrier was that 2 more immortal emperors had betrayed the Eastern Sky Alliance army. Previously, it was great Emperor Mo He who betrayed the outsiders. Now 2 more immortal emperors, Guihua and Dongling, had betrayed them. Did the 2 of them betray the alliance before the war? Or were they like Mo He who had long been involved with the outsiders? Ningfan did not know. His heart was extremely heavy and he felt an indescribable sense of self-blame. If he did not go into seclusion, if he ignored Taiyuan Fairy's order, and left the 11th route to reinforce the other routes, would Jihua and the others not have died? Would there be fewer people who sacrificed their lives to protect the Eastern Sky? I'm sorry. I've been in seclusion for quite a long time this time. I just found out about the situation in the border river. Ningfan contacted Emperor Tsong. His tone was cold, but Emperor Tsong could still hear the self-blame and guilt in Ningfan's voice. Emperor Tsong was not at Taiyuan Ferry. The rapid deterioration of the situation made him unable to stay at the rear with peace of mind. Thus, he had no choice but to rush to the front line. After hearing Ningfan's message, Emperor Tsong felt gratified. He coughed and said with a bitter smile, I really didn't expect that the #1 devil of the Eastern Sky who has always been indifferent to life and death would actually blame himself for the loss of some lives. However, What obligation do you have to blame yourself? You are just an immortal venerate and a deputy general. Up until now, you have already fulfilled your mission. You protected the 11th route and protected your subordinates. You have already done enough. There is no need for you to shoulder the rise and fall of the entire eastern sky on your own shoulders. I am the Alliance Lord. The one who should blame myself and take responsibility is me. We came to this alliance meeting to protect the eastern sky out of our own free will. We have long been prepared to die in battle. What you said is true. However, if it wasn't because of my incompetence, how could I not even notice that traitors have infiltrated the Alliance army one after another? First, there was Primordial Pill and Maha. Then there was Ghost Flower and Dongling Hateful. Hateful. Cough cough cough. Perhaps because he was too angry, his injuries were affected. From the other end of the communication jade slip came the sound of Emperor Tsong coughing violently. When his breathing calmed down, Emperor Tsong let out a long sigh and said unwillingly, "You have also heard about the situation in the border river. I did not expect that even Dongling was a traitor. He leaked our plan to the foreign races, and even caused the death of fellow Daoist Tai Li. When they found out that recovering the water pass could actually help to repair the immortal sovereign's seal, those foreign races were shocked. On the same day, they increased the number of troops and guarded the water passes of the 3, 6 and 9 routes like an iron bucket. Therefore, until now, these 3 routes are still unable to recover the entire territory. In this way, we can't start the next phase of the plan. That's why I didn't inform you to come out of seclusion and let you stay in seclusion. Now that you have come out, I wonder what your plan is? I have stayed in the 10th route long enough. It's time to change places. The 3, 6 and 9 routes, which route needs support the most? You should go to the 3rd route. I don't know what happened there recently. There are actually experts who mysteriously disappeared one after another. Half a month ago, even fellow Taoist Lai Jun was taken away by a ray of red light. Since his life plate hasn't shattered, he shouldn't be dead yet. He must be trapped somewhere by the foreign races. Since he hates the foreign races to the core, I don't think he will betray them. I have a lot of contacts with him and I know his personality very well. His disappearance really worries me. I don't want to see another fellow Taoist immortal emperor die. Alright. I will go to the 3rd route to investigate this matter. If I have the chance, I will recover the main pass of the 3rd route as well. Ning Fan secretly made up his mind. According to the information, there were currently a total of 9 immortal emperors of the foreign races guarding the White Tiger Pass. To the Eastern Heavens emperors of the 3rd route, 9 immortal emperors of the foreign races were enough to make them unable to fight back. To Ning Fan, with his strength that had skyrocketed, even if he did not use the world bottle, he would not have to fight a difficult battle like last time when facing such a large number of immortal emperors. If Emperor Tsong and the others couldn't recover all the water passes, it would be the same to let him complete this task. Chapter 1133. The 3rd Waterway, White Tiger Pass. This was the final barrier of the 3rd Waterway. The towering pass was built with white jade from the ancient immortal world. It was like an ancient white tiger that had been sleeping for millions of years, sleeping soundly on the surface of the water. Above and below the pass, countless experts of the foreign races were gathering their armies. It seemed like they were about to set off. On the city wall, 9 strange beasts with the cultivation of immortal emperor realm, and more than 100 immortal venerables and immortal kings were plotting something. Words like Battle King, Crossing Tribulation, and Sneak Attack were mentioned from time to time. Is the information reliable? Is that troublesome Battle King Luo Ho really going to cross the crucial 9-5 Great Tribulation above the eastern boundary river? Could it be that this group of cunning eastern sky ants is setting up a trap? Could it be that they want to lure our main force out of the White Tiger Pass, and then take the opportunity to sneak attack this pass? For dozens of years, they have used many schemes to seize this pass. A great sovereign of the foreign races said hesitantly. It's absolutely true. 10 years ago, that Battle King Luo Ho was struck by my divine heavenly tribulation egg. Not only did the big and small heavenly tribulations appear one after another, but even the 9-5 Great Tribulation that he had painstakingly suppressed was also drawn out by me. This time he really can't suppress the 9-5 Great Tribulation anymore. Hee. Daring to cross such a great tribulation above the boundary river is simply courting death. This is a heaven-sent opportunity, we can't miss it. Another great sovereign of the foreign races sneered. We just took advantage of the time when the blood god went out to look for food and schemed against that old man Lai Jun. If we can kill that Luoho bastard this time, it will be a great contribution. The great divine priest will certainly reward us. There's no need to discuss further. This is a great opportunity. It's time to kill all the eastern sky ants in one fell swoop. Let's go. Following the command of the half-step quasi-saint immortal sovereign of the foreign races, the foreign races army surged out of the White Tiger Pass like tidewater and rushed towards the Azure Sky Pass. The third waterway, Azure Sky Pass. This was the second last impregnable pass on the third waterway. The reason why it was named Azure Sky Pass was because the formation of this pass could absorb the water chi of heaven and earth, causing the sky above the pass to be filled with azure clouds all year round. The rainy season was the most common weather in Azure Sky Pass. However, in recent days, the cumulonimbus clouds in the sky above the Azure Sky Fortress had suddenly disappeared, replaced by thousands of thick tribulation clouds. From time to time, the silhouettes of golden dragons would appear, dancing in the clouds. At this moment, the entire Azure Sky Pass was solemn. Even the person in charge of the Azure Sky Pass, Emperor Eightscapes, looked worried. Among the 12 waterways of the East Boundary River, only the 3rd, 6th, and 9th waterways had yet to be conquered. Among these 3 waterways, the 6th waterway was the most heavily guarded, followed by the 9th waterway, and the 3rd waterway was slightly better. But it was only slightly better. After the series of unforeseen events in the Eastern Boundary River, the situation here was no longer optimistic. The third path was originally guarded by 2 8th Tribulation Immortal Emperors, Ba Jing and Tai Li. However, because a traitor like Dongling Immortal Wang had appeared in the third path, Great Emperor Tai Li was ambushed by several foreign race immortal emperors and died without a complete corpse. Since then, the third path was only left with 1/8th Tribulation Immortal Emperor, Emperor Eightscapes. Fortunately, he still had Emperor Lai Jun, Battle King Luoho, and the 3 sons of Jianyu under his command. At that time, the situation of the third path was not beyond redemption. However, half a month ago, when Emperor Lai Jun went out for a routine patrol, he suddenly disappeared and his whereabouts were still unknown. After that, Battle King Luoho was also in trouble. He was actually schemed against by the foreign race and triggered the 9-5 Great Tribulation. When the bad news came one after another, Emperor Eightscapes could not help but feel anxious even with his calm state of mind. In a stone chamber in Azure Sky Pass, Battle King Luoho was as thin as a stick. His chi was declining and his face was filled with pain. He was trying his best to suppress the arrival of the 9-5 Great Tribulation. The 9-5 Great Tribulation was the tribulation of becoming an emperor. In the past, Battle King Luoho was injured by Sun Luo, and fell into a deep slumber for tens of millions of years. After he woke up, Battle King Luoho's cultivation base skyrocketed, and he already had the qualifications to become an emperor. However, because the failure rate of becoming an emperor was extremely high, Luoho had never been fully prepared. Thus he did not really trigger the 9-5 Great Tribulation. He just temporarily suppressed it and hoped that he could break through after he was fully prepared. The tribulation of becoming an emperor was extremely dangerous. If he succeeded, he would advance to the next level. If he failed, he would die. There was no third possibility. Because this was a tribulation that concerned his life, anyone who wanted to break through to the immortal emperor realm would be extremely cautious. Luoho was no exception. According to his estimation, he needed to prepare for at least hundreds of thousands of years before he had the confidence to successfully transcend the tribulation. However, the foreign race's immortal emperor was too despicable. They took advantage of his weakness and used something called the Heavenly Tribulation Divine Egg to directly trigger the 9-5 Great Tribulation that he had been suppressing. To Luoho, who was not fully prepared, this was definitely a bolt from the blue. At this moment, the hundreds and thousands of tribulation clouds in the sky above Azure Sky Pass were the evidence that his 9-5 Great Tribulation was about to descend. Thinking about how the foreign race used such a vicious scheme to harm Luo Ho, the 8 heavenly emperors and the other immortal emperors of the third path were furious. However, they did not plan to express their anger in front of Luo Ho. They were afraid that it would affect Luo Ho's confidence in transcending the tribulation. Therefore, the immortal emperors could only suppress the anger in their hearts. They forced a smile and comforted Luo Ho. Fellow Taoist Luo, you only need to focus on transcending the tribulation. You don't need to worry about anything else. We will take care of everything outside. We will definitely create a perfect environment for you to transcend the tribulation. We will not let anyone disturb you. Luo Ho was very grateful to the 8 heavenly emperors and the others for comforting him. However, he still smiled bitterly and sighed. Fellow Taoist 8 heavenly emperors, fellow Taoist swordsmen, you don't need to hide it from me. How can my 9-5 great tribulation be undisturbed? Those foreign race spent so much effort to trigger my 9-5 great tribulation. They are determined to kill me. How can they let me transcend the tribulation peacefully? If I am not wrong, the moment my 9-5 great tribulation descends will be the moment the foreign race invades Azure Sky Pass. They will definitely come and disturb me, the 8 heavenly emperors firmly said. With this old man here, how can we allow those evil creatures to disturb fellow Taoists' tribulation? This old man will definitely stop this matter no matter what. 8 Scenic Emperor said solemnly. The 8 heavenly emperors resolutely said. In the previous bloody battle, we 3 brothers owe you our lives. This time, even if we have to stake our lives, we will definitely drive away those foreign races and protect you. Luo Ho sighed. He still wanted to say something, but the 8 heavenly emperors and the others turned into rays of light and flew out of the stone room. As time passed, the heavenly tribulation red clouds above Azure Sky Pass became more and more numerous. Black astral winds whistled, and wherever they passed, the void trembled. A scorching aura spread out from the red clouds. That was the heat emitted by the sudden combustion of the golden dragon image in the red clouds. It was unknown how many of those burning dragon phantoms were, but they all emitted a supreme emperor's might. That wasn't a pressure that ordinary cultivators could withstand. Countless Eastern Sky cultivators inside Azure Sky Pass were suffocated by that supreme emperor's might. This was a rarely encountered great emperor tribulation. To be able to observe this tribulation should be the fortune of every cultivator who wasn't an immortal emperor. However, none of the Eastern Sky cultivators felt happy because of this matter. Everyone was as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Everyone knew that the foreign races would most likely launch a large-scale attack at some point in time. Lord Battle King, will he really die in the 9-5 tribulation? With our strength, will we be able to protect Lord Battle King? If something happens to the Battle King, our third waterway's strongest force will be one less. Countless Eastern Sky cultivators revealed worried expressions and discussed spiritedly. The 8 heavenly emperors, the Sword Mountain's 3 sons, and the other immortal emperors also revealed worried expressions. They stood on top of the city wall and looked at the tribulation clouds that covered the sky. Boom! A burning phantom dragon suddenly turned into a golden thunderbolt, as thick as an adult's arm, and fell from the sky. In the instant that the golden thunderbolt fell, hundreds and thousands of golden thunderbolts were born and fiercely struck down towards Azure Sky Pass. The 9-5 tribulation requires a total of 45 days of tribulation thunderbolts. The tribulation thunderbolts are stronger than the previous day. If all of them are passed, they can cut the Tao Mountain, gather the Emperor Qi, and truly become an emperor. The structure of the formation of each big pass of the Boundary River is very special. This is a formation specially used to defend against the foreign races. The defense against other things is extremely low, but against the heavenly tribulation, there is no defense at all. The 8 heavenly emperors and the others sighed again and again. If the formation of Azure Sky Pass didn't have such a special characteristic, perhaps they could rely on the formation to help Luo Ho resist the heavenly tribulation. Sure enough, after hundreds and thousands of golden thunderbolts fell on the formation light, they actually directly penetrated through the layers of formation light of Azure Sky Pass and locked onto the stone room where Luo Ho was located. Luo Ho didn't dare to be negligent. He waved his big hand, and the battle intent between the heaven and earth suddenly turned into countless big battle fire characters, colliding with the golden thunderbolts. Boom boom boom. The golden thunderbolts and the big battle fire characters collided fiercely. However, because it was only the first day of Tribulation Thunderbolts, its power was still weak. Therefore, none of the Tribulation Thunderbolts could break through Luoho's defense. Once the aura of the 8 heavenly sovereigns got too close to Luoho, who was in the center of the tribulation, the power of the heavenly tribulation would increase by several times. As a last resort, they could only stand very far away and couldn't help Luoho transcend the tribulation. The Tribulation Thunderbolt struck continuously, not giving Luoho any chance to breathe. On the second day, the power of the Golden Thunderbolts suddenly increased sharply. It was almost twice the power of the Tribulation Thunderbolts on the first day. On the third day, the power of the Tribulation Thunderbolts increased by 3 times. On the fourth day, it increased by 4 times. On the 5th day, on the 11th day, on the 19th day, on the 22nd day, Battle King Luoho was indeed a peerless genius. An ordinary immortal king might feel that the Tribulation Thunderbolts were difficult to resist on the 5th day, but Luoho persisted until the 22nd day before he felt that it was a little difficult. This was also because of the heavenly tribulation divine egg causing mischief in his body. If it weren't for the injury caused by the divine egg, Luoho might have to wait for a few more days before he felt that crossing the tribulation was strenuous. The warfire characters he used to protect his body were smashed by the Tribulation Thunderbolts one after another. As a last resort, the Battle King took out a congenital magic treasure and used it together with the warfire characters to resist the Tribulation Thunderbolts. This wasn't his own congenital magic treasure. It was the 8 heavenly sovereigns' life origin magic treasure, but it was lent to him. The selfish Eastern Sky cultivators couldn't lend their life origin magic treasures to outsiders to cross the tribulation. Perhaps it was because of the affection they had for each other on the battlefield, but the 8 heavenly sovereigns couldn't bear to see Luoho perish. Clenching his teeth, he lent his life origin magic treasure to Luoho. This action might destroy his life origin magic treasure. However, he couldn't care too much about it. On the 23rd day, on the 26th day, on the 28th day, the Tribulation Thunderbolts were getting stronger by the day. Even if he used a congenital magic treasure to block the tribulation, Battle King Luoho still felt that it was strenuous. Without any other choice, he used the second congenital magic treasure. It was a sword, the natal sword of the Sword King of Shu Mountain, one of the 3 sons of Sword Yu, the divine sword of Shu Nan. The 3 sons of Sword Mountain were all sword cultivators. As long as the sword existed, they lived. If the sword died, they would die. It was impossible for them to lend their natal treasured swords to outsiders. However, they still lent their natal treasured swords to their comrades. With the protection of 2 Khanate Dharma treasures, Luoho managed to hold on. The 29th day, the 32nd day, the 35th day, the strained Luoho used his 3rd innate magical treasure, Sword Monarch Yellow Mountain's Yellow Cloud Divine Sword. Controlling 3 Khanate treasures at the same time was Luoho's limit. Therefore, he did not borrow the Huashan Godly Sword from Huashan Sword Sovereign. This was his limit in controlling treasures. He had barely survived the heavenly tribulation. On the 39th day, Luoho was careless and missed a bolt of golden tribulation lightning. The golden lightning struck the stone room and caused a huge explosion. Within the smoke and dust, Luoho's entire body was covered in blood. He walked out from the rubble, forcefully swallowing the sweet blood in his throat as he continued to control his magic treasures to resist the heavenly tribulation. Just one bolt of the heavenly tribulation had actually injured his physical body, which was stronger than many immortal emperors. This tribulation lightning was so terrifying. He was beginning to tire. His magic power was beginning to run out. More and more tribulation lightning began to pass through his defenses and strike his body. He roared loudly and transformed into his sorcerer god true body. Using his true body and his magic treasures, he forcibly resisted the tribulation lightning that filled the sky. The 40th day, the 41st day, the 42nd day, injuries began to appear on Luoho's sorcerer god true body. His flesh and blood were split open by the golden tribulation lightning, and his vitality was rapidly flowing away under the attack of the heavenly tribulation. No one dared to interfere with Luoho's heavenly tribulation to help him. Doing so would only make Luoho's heavenly tribulation even more terrifying, and even more impossible to cross. The crowd of Eastern Sky cultivators could only silently watch Luoho cross the heavenly tribulation, silently praying that Luoho could successfully cross the heavenly tribulation. The 43rd day. The 44th day. Luoho's 9-5 Great Tribulation was already nearing its end. The power of the heavenly tribulation suddenly became extremely berserk. It was actually 100 times more than the original. Under the attack of the heavenly tribulation, Luoho's injuries were on the verge of death, and his breathing was weak. He had prepared too little for this 9-5 tribulation. It was very likely that he would not be able to last until the 45th day. This was the result of crossing the 9-5 tribulation without any preparation. Luoho's chances of successfully crossing the heavenly tribulation were already very slim. But those strange races still didn't intend to let him off. These past few years, the strange races experts had suffered many losses at the hands of Battle King Luoho. Today was the perfect opportunity for them to properly repay Luoho. You seem to be crossing the heavenly tribulation with great difficulty. Do you want us to give you a hand? Amidst the sound of thunder that filled the sky, there was suddenly a mocking voice that tore apart the heaven and earth and transmitted into the ears of every Eastern Sky cultivator. The complexions of all the Eastern Sky cultivators changed. Under their nervous gazes, the silhouettes of countless giant beasts appeared in the distance of Azure Sky Pass and unceasingly approached. Thunder amplification technique. In the distance, it was unknown which strange race expert had launched a divine ability. The power of the tribulation lightning in the sky above Azure Sky Pass suddenly increased by a lot. Damn it! Those strange races want to strengthen the power of the heavenly tribulation and strangle fellow Taoist Luoho on the 44th day. We must stop them. The complexions of the 8 scenery emperors and the others changed dramatically. They wanted to stop the operation of the thunder amplification technique, but because they were participating in the heavenly tribulation, it made the heavenly tribulation even more powerful than before. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Even if they wanted to help Luoho, they couldn't interfere. Those strange race immortal emperors were getting closer and closer to Azure Sky Pass. Suddenly, it was unknown which strange race expert launched a divine ability towards the tribulation clouds in the sky. Calamity nurturing technique. The power of the tribulation lightning had increased by a lot. See Sky Thunder Nurturing Technique. The power of the tribulation was still increasing. Great Freedom Devil God Thunder. The power of the tribulation had been artificially increased to an undefeatable level. Muffled groans came from Luoho's mouth, and his eyes were filled with unimaginable anger. Even if no one interfered, he didn't have the confidence to endure all the tribulation lightning for the 45th day. At this moment, with the strange races causing trouble, he would definitely die on the 44th day. Unwilling. If these strange races had killed him on the battlefield, he would have been wholeheartedly convinced. However, they unexpectedly used this kind of despicable method to plot against him. He was unwilling. Fellow Taoist Luo, be careful. It's the Tao extinguishing thunder infant. Those bastards actually took out this thing. All of a sudden, the expressions of the 8 scenery emperors and the others changed drastically, because a golden lightning infant was suddenly born in the deepest part of the tribulation clouds. It was an incomparably gigantic infant with dragon horns, a dragon tail and dragon scales. Its eyes did not have the scara, and its smile was frightening. It was a lightning infant that was born from the purest power of the 9-5 tribulation lightning. It was a strange phenomenon of tribulation lightning that would only appear when a cultivator, who was not accepted by heaven and earth, became an emperor. Battle King Luoho was not Ningfan. He was not rejected by heaven and earth. His 9-5 tribulation would not have such a ferocious phenomenon. However, those strange races inherited their inheritance from the Z-Wei immortal domain. They had all kinds of mysterious methods that could greatly increase the power of their enemies' heavenly tribulations. The power of Battle King Luo Ho's 9-5 tribulation had been artificially increased. When it was increased to a certain extent, it even produced the legendary Dao Destruction Lightning Infant. Not only the 8 scenery emperors and the others were shocked, but even the immortal emperors of the strange races who did this were also a little surprised. It was also their first time seeing the Dao Destruction Lightning Infant. They did not expect that after using dozens of secret techniques that could harm the heavenly tribulations, they would actually produce such a terrifying thing. This is great. It was no longer comparable to them who continued to interfere with Luo Ho's tribulation. According to the legends, a Dao Destruction Lightning Infant had the power to instantly destroy 10 immortal emperors. Next, this Dao Destruction Lightning Infant would only need a single attack to completely kill Luo Ho. If the aftermath of the attack spreads, it might even engulf the entire Azure Sky Fortress, causing countless casualties among the Eastern Heavens cultivators. Ha. It's actually a Dao Destruction Lightning Infant. This is something that even I, a half-step quasi-sage realm cultivator, do not dare to face head-on. That Luo Ho bastard will definitely die. It seems like we are going to make a contribution again. The third group will lose another Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperor. Great Divine Priest will definitely reward us. Rumble. The Dao Destruction Lightning Infant sat under the tribulation cloud. Its chubby little hand grabbed downwards and a golden sea of lightning instantly drowned the entire Azure Sky Fortress. Under the leadership of the 8 scenery emperors and the others, countless Eastern Heaven cultivators tried their best to resist the descent of the Sea of Lightning. Unfortunately, they were powerless to stop it. At this moment, Ning Fan, who was hiding at the side and secretly guarding Luo Ho, tore open the void and revealed himself. He held up a small sapling in the air and ordered, "Wondrous tree of 7 treasures. With the power that I bestow upon you, wipe out all the lightning in this place." Swish swish swished at the 8 scenery emperors, the 3 sons of Sword Mountain. Luo Ho and countless Eastern Heaven cultivators could not resist the Dao Destruction Lightning Ocean even after joining hands. However, after the Tree of 7 Treasures brushed against it hundreds and thousands of times, it exploded with a loud bang. The broken lightning power scattered in all directions and vanished in the air. Ning Fan, who was dressed in white robes, appeared in everyone's line of sight. He stood in midair and looked down at the experts of the foreign races, as if they were ants. There was no disdain in his eyes. However, when the experts of the foreign races looked into his eyes, they all felt a sense of inferiority that came from nowhere. That kind of despicableness was not just because of the difference in their cultivation levels. It was also because of the difference in species. It was not the difference between a god and a human. Instead, it was the Father God who was more noble than ordinary gods, who was looking down on all living beings. His gaze shifted to Luo Ho. However, he smiled peacefully, just like in the past. "Brother Luo, don't worry. With me here, no one can disturb your heavenly tribulation." Not good. It's the white-robed Yama. The moment they saw Ning Fan's appearance, countless experts of the foreign races were so shocked that their faces turned pale. Their imposing aura collapsed. This devil actually came. Moreover, he actually blocked the Dao Destruction attack that even a half-step quasi-saint realm expert would find hard to resist. How is this possible? Even a half-step quasi-saint realm expert could not do this. Are they dreaming? Wait. When did the white-robed Yama advance to the Immortal King realm? It has only been a few years. Why did this young man's cultivation base undergo such a tremendous change? Chapter 1134. In theory, a few decades was definitely not enough for an immortal venerable to cultivate to the Immortal King realm. Unless one used some kind of inheritance method that damaged one's foundation, or borrowed some kind of time-lapsing artifact, they would not be able to do so. Could it be that the white-robed King of Hell had actually used such a tiger and wolf method to forcefully raise his cultivation? No, that's not right. It was not the Enlightenment technique. It wasn't a time treasure either. That legend was actually true. The legend of the 16 heart pill was true. This boy has a trace of dragon horse aura on him. Are you kidding me? This child actually managed to refine the 16 dragon horse crown princes into 16 heart pills in just a few decades? That's a legendary pill. Does it really exist? How dare he? Doesn't he know that the Dragon Horse clan is the Blood God's exclusive property? How dare he eat Lord Blood God's food? Aren't you afraid of being cursed by the Blood God? I never thought that the 16 heart pill could really allow a cultivator to become a celestial king. This is too scary. This white-robed Yama was already extremely powerful when he was still a celestial sovereign. Now that he has become a celestial king with the help of the 16 heart pill, won't he be even more difficult to deal with? Don't be afraid. He acted on his own and interfered with the heavenly tribulation. His aura has already been locked on by the heavenly tribulation, so there's no need for us to act. Let's see how he'll be killed by the Tao Annihilation Thunder Nascent. Even though Ning Fan was alone, he had caused countless experts of the foreign races to exclaim in shock and chaos. His presence was too strong, so strong that no one dared to ignore his existence. On the other hand, the entire Azure Sky Pass was filled with thunderous cheers because of Ning Fan's sudden appearance. To the foreign races, Ning Fan might be the most troublesome enemy. However, to the cultivators of the Eastern Heaven, he was the most reliable helper. Brother Ning, it's fortunate that you came in time. Otherwise, I would have already died under the heavenly tribulation. Luoho's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. He looked at Ning Fan, who was high up in the sky. His heart was filled with gratitude and shame at the same time. At the same time, he was astonished by how fast Ning Fan's cultivation base improved. He owed Ning Fan his life. Until today, he still had not found a suitable opportunity to repay Ning Fan. Instead, he was saved by Ning Fan again. He could not help but feel deeply ashamed. If it wasn't for Ning Fan, he would certainly die in the 9-5 Great Tribulation this time. Sigh. It seemed like he owed Ning Fan another life. It's just a small matter. Brother Luo, you don't have to worry about it. If you didn't fall into the trap of the foreign races, you wouldn't have been killed by the 9-5 tribulation without my help. Ning Fan comforted her. Then his eyes turned towards the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul, and his expression turned solemn. Fellow Taoist Ning, be careful. The infant sitting on the tribulation cloud was the legendary Tao Annihilation Thunder Nascent that could kill immortal emperors with a wave of its hand. Although you've blocked the first round of the Nascent Soul's tribulation, you've also interfered with the heavenly tribulation, causing its power to skyrocket. The next attack of the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent will definitely not be easily blocked by you again. Quickly descend into the pass. We will join forces to block the second round of attacks from this nascent soul. The 8 scenery emperors and the others were pleasantly surprised by Ning Fan's arrival. At the same time, they reminded Ning Fan, worried that something might happen to him in the upcoming lightning tribulation. Ning Fan, however, shook his head gently and rejected their kind intentions. He said calmly, "It doesn't matter. This Tao Extermination Lightning Nascent Soul is still within my ability. I alone am enough to destroy it. Don't make a move, lest you get heavily injured." What an arrogant tone. He actually wanted to fight the legendary Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul alone. However, the 8 scenery emperors and the others were not narrow-minded people. They knew that Ning Fan did not want them to intervene, because it was for their own good. The Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul was just too terrifying. Legend has it that there were once 10 immortal emperors who coveted the enormous lightning power of the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. They joined forces to attack it, but in the end, 6 of them died and 4 of them were injured. They were worried about Ning Fan's safety, and were willing to fight alongside him to fight against the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. Of course, it would be better if Ning Fan had a way to deal with this nascent soul himself, and they did not need to do anything. They did not have the confidence to protect themselves in the fight against the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. Even though they did not think that Ning Fan, who was at the Immortal King realm, could kill the legendary Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. Perhaps Ning Fan had a way to restrain the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. That was why he was so confident. Rumble. The Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul attacked again. More golden lightning seas were summoned by its chubby little hand. With monstrous anger, it aimed at Ning Fan and struck him. How could it not be angry? One should know that every time a Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul like him appeared, even a quasi-saint realm expert would have to be wary of it. They would not dare to go against the will of the heavenly tribulation. However, this young man was really bold. He actually dared to stop his tribulation with a mere immortal king realm cultivation base. This was the first crime. This young man even carried an aura that was not tolerated by heaven and earth. It made him feel displeased and unbearable killing intent. This was the second crime. This young man should be killed without mercy. The Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul's expression was filled with disdain. It firmly believed that the reason why Ning Fan could block its first round of attack was because it did not use its full strength. However, it decided to use 50% of its strength for the second round of attack. This amount of strength was enough to kill an 8 Tribulation Immortal Emperor in a single blow. It was certainly more than enough to kill an Immortal King Realm expert. The sea of lightning blasted towards Ning Fan, turning into countless illusions of the ancient immortal watchtowers. It was as if the entire ancient heaven and earth was crashing towards Ning Fan with a mighty force that could instantly kill an 8 Tribulation Immortal Emperor. Everyone was shocked by the second round of attack of the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul. Even the half-step quasi-sage realm experts of the foreign races were secretly shocked. They did not have the confidence to block this attack by themselves. Ning Fan, however, remained expressionless. He calmly controlled the Tree of Seven Wonders and sent out hundreds and thousands of attacks towards the sky. Logically speaking, this Tree of Seven Wonders had yet to advance to the innate grade. Even if it was a special type of magic treasure, it could only display the power of a low-grade innate grade magic treasure at most. However, for some unknown reason, the power of this wood element magic treasure actually rose to another level when it was in Ning Fan's hands. Every time it was used, its power was not any weaker than a mid-grade innate magic treasure. All the spectators were shocked. They could not understand how Ning Fan obtained another mid-grade innate magic treasure. This young man really has too many treasures, doesn't he? Under everyone's astonished gazes, the second round of attack of the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul was destroyed by Ning Fan's Tree of Seven Wonders without any mercy. Moreover, at the moment when he destroyed the second round of attack of the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul, Ning Fan pointed a finger at the sky. A massive lightning diagram appeared between heaven and earth and swept towards the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul, trying to take it away. This lightning diagram was none other than the Tai Su lightning diagram. The Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul was so angry that it bared its teeth. It could tell that Ning Fan's lightning diagram had the ability to counter lightning. However, there was a limit to it. It was not enough to restrain it at all. Ning Fan actually used such a despicable method to deal with it. He was simply looking down on its dignity. The Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul became even more enraged. He suddenly pointed his chubby little hand at the tip of his finger. All the lightning power of heaven and earth gathered at the tip of his finger. With a single finger he crushed the Tai Su lightning diagram. However, even though the Tai Su lightning diagram was broken, it was not destroyed because of it. Among the broken pieces of the lightning diagram, there were traces of the Tao law of wood that were connected to each other, as if they were sewn together by a needle and thread. Then, as soon as Ning Fan activated his Tao law of wood, the broken lightning diagram was instantly repaired. The vitality of the plants in heaven and earth, on the other hand, strangely decreased a little. It was nowhere to be found, as if it was sucked away by Ning Fan in an instant. Gua gua? The Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul was stunned. It could not figure out why its full force attack could not destroy the seemingly weak Tai Su lightning diagram. Of course, Ning Fan would not explain the reason to the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul. Seeing that the Tai Su lightning diagram failed to hit its target, Ning Fan smiled faintly and praised the Tao Annihilation Lightning nascent soul. It's indeed a legendary item. It doesn't seem possible for me to capture you directly with just a small Tao of this lightning diagram. As soon as his words fell, countless experts of the Eastern Heaven and foreign races inside and outside the Azure Sky Pass sucked in a cold breath. They were dumbfounded by Ning Fan's arrogance. Ning Fan actually wanted to capture the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. The cultivators of the Eastern Heaven did not say much. They had always been very confident in Ning Fan. On the other hand, the members of the foreign races had already mocked Ning Fan for overestimating himself. Does this white-robed Yama think that he's a quasi-saint? He actually wants to capture the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. What a joke! Even a quasi-saint might not be able to do it. Besides, even if he can do it, no quasi-saint would be foolish enough to take the risk of offending the heavenly prestige and capture the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. Since the Dharma ending period, the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Souls have not been replenished by the power of the third step plane. Thus, their numbers could not increase. There are only a few of them left. In the entire heavenly Tao of the Eastern Heaven, there are only 3 or 4 Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Souls left. This young man is too greedy. He actually wants to capture one of them. He will definitely suffer the consequences and die in the hands of the Lightning Nascent Soul. Rumble. Amidst the mocking laughter of the experts of the foreign races, the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul waved its lightning over and over again, shattering the Tai Su lightning diagram again and again. However, it still could not truly destroy the diagram. No matter how many times it was shattered, the Tai Su lightning diagram could repair itself and return to its original state. Gradually, some of the experts of the foreign races noticed the strangeness of the Tai Su lightning diagram and were shocked. The power that Ning Fan used to repair the Tai Su lightning diagram was actually the extremely pure power of the wood palm position. It was not the half-baked palm position but the true palm position. Why can an immortal king realm master control the void palm position? Could it be that this young man has already attained the void palm position? He actually succeeded in controlling the void palm position with his immortal king realm cultivation base. This is absolutely impossible. The members of the foreign races gasped. This is the complete wood palm position. It's completely different from the half-step palm position of the Alliance Master. Wood is the source of life force. Cultivators who possess the complete wood palm position will have unimaginably terrifying recovery speed, be it their divine abilities or physical body. No wonder fellow Taoist Ning's lightning diagram could be repaired again and again. The 8 scenery god emperors and the others also exclaimed in surprise. Ning Fan did not bother to pay attention to the exclamations of the people around him. His eyes were only focused on the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. Seeing that the Tai Su lightning diagram could not do anything to the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul, Ning Fan suddenly activated the cross-shaped halos. Like an arrow that has just left the bow, he directly flew towards the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. As soon as they met, he threw out tens of ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes. The Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul was feeling gloomy when it realized that it could not completely destroy the Tai Su lightning diagram. When it saw Ning Fan rushing towards it, it immediately snorted disdainfully. It did not bother to block Ning Fan's ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes at all. Rumble. With Ning Fan's current cultivation base, the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes that he performed with all his might was extremely powerful. Even if it was just the beginning, it was enough to kill a 5 tribulation immortal king with a single punch. Tens of such heavy punches landed on the gigantic body of the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul. However, it only produced layers of lightning sparks. It could not hurt the origin of the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul at all. Even with Ning Fan's personality, he could not help but feel a little surprised. It's indeed a legendary item. It actually has such a strong defense. While Ning Fan was feeling surprised, he suddenly saw the eyes of the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul shoot out 2 rays of divine light. The 2 rays of divine light were condensed from lightning power at the Tao Source realm. For some reason, they carried a trace of primal chaos chi. When the attack landed, it easily penetrated Ning Fan's divine spirit body, leaving 2 hideous bloody holes on his chest and abdomen. There was also a trace of lightning that carried primal chaos chi that invaded his body through the wounds, wreaking havoc and destroying it. Primal chaos lightning, huh? It does have some tricks up its sleeves. Unfortunately, the primal chaos chi is too little. It is far from enough to injure me severely. Repair. Ning Fan silently circulated the power of the Wood Sovereign Realm. Countless tree roots suddenly emerged from the two bloody holes on his chest and abdomen. They intertwined with each other and filled up his wounds. Those roots then turned into his flesh and skin, allowing his flesh to regenerate at an extremely fast speed. In just the blink of an eye, the injuries that Ning Fan suffered from the Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul were completely healed. With the power of the Wood Sovereign Realm and other healing methods, Ning Fan was able to heal them in one go. Among them, Ning Fan used the power of the Wood Sovereign Realm. At the bottom of the Realm River, the life force of countless aquatic plants was extracted by Ning Fan without anyone noticing. Gua Gua? The Tao Annihilation Lightning Nascent Soul became even more puzzled. It could not understand why Ning Fan was still not hurt even a little after using the Primal Chaos Lightning. Ning Fan was clearly just a little immortal king. Why did he have such strange abilities? Rumble! Rumble! Ning Fan threw out another series of ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes. The force of his punches became stronger and faster, like a violent storm. In just 10 breaths, he had already hit 3,000 consecutive strikes. This was the first time he was able to unleash 3,000 consecutive strikes without activating his ancient true body, or the God-vanquishing shield. One had to know that the rebounding force of the 3,000 ancient demons breaking the mountain strike was extremely terrifying. If it was before, he wouldn't have been able to do this and would have been killed by his own fist. But things were different now. After the refinement of tens of millions of immeasurable pills, both his physical body and magic power had undergone a tremendous change. In addition to the recovery power of the wood palm seat, even if he did not activate his eternal true body, he could still display the 3,000 ancient devils mountain breaking strike without sustaining any injuries. If he activated his primordial true body, he would have the confidence to try even 4, 5, or even 6,000 ancient devil mountain crushing strikes. Puff. It was the sound of the Tao Annihilation Thunder Nascent Soul coughing blood. He coughed out a mouthful of lightning blood with a sizzling sound. He was sent flying away by Ning Fan's 3,000 ancient devils mountain breaking strike. His expression changed drastically. He was astonished, he was shaken. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand why this puny little immortal king in front of him could be so powerful with each punch. The formless fist force was like a connected mountain range. After 3,000 consecutive strikes, it was actually enough to injure his origin. This was the first time in his life that he had been injured by a mere celestial king. This young man is too heaven-defying. Gua gua gua. Who are you? Gua 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 gua. Do you want to go against heaven? Gua 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 gua. Quickly step back and I will spare your life. No one could understand what the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant was saying. Only Ning Fan could understand it. However, he was disdainful to give the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant any response. Going against heaven? Is it very scary? The moment he stepped into the Divine Spirit Tao, heaven and earth could no longer tolerate him, alright? He could no longer turn back. Using the power of the wood palm seat, Ning Fan healed the wounds caused by the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant. He had no choice but to admit that this Tao Destruction Lightning Infant was rather impressive. Even the 3,000 ancient devils mountain crushing strike could not destroy it. Thus, he had no choice but to use all of his abilities and transform into his eternal true body. A golden flame giant that looked down upon the world appeared between heaven and earth. The 3,000 ancient devils mountain crushing strike was Ning Fan's current limit without using his true body. However, if he uses his true body, this number of consecutive strikes was far from his limit. When the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant saw Ning Fan's chi skyrocketing, it was shocked. Divine light shot out from its eyes again, and it attacked Ning Fan with the Primal Chaos Lightning. This time, however, its Primal Chaos Lightning Infant could no longer break through Ning Fan's physical defense. The evolution of his crippled Divine Spirit body and the birth of his Divine Spark had greatly improved Ning Fan's defense. With his eternal true body activated, even a first-level quasi-saint would find it difficult to injure Ning Fan. The attack of the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant could not even break through the golden flames on the surface of Ning Fan's body. Boom. Ning Fan continued to use his previous fist force to strike down his fist light like a rainstorm. The rain of golden flames could destroy heaven and earth, causing the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant to flee in all directions. How would the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant dare to take the 3,000 ancient Devil Mountain crushing strike head-on? It had no choice but to run and evade. However, the entire heaven and earth had been sealed by Ning Fan's fist light. It was easier said than done to evade all of them. Even if it tried to evade, it could only avoid most of the fist light, and would still be hit by a small portion of them. What terrified the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant even more was that Ning Fan's combo was still rising. Is the 3,000 combo not his limit yet? The 4,000 combo? The 5,000 combo? The 6,000 combo? Ning Fan still had yet to reach the limit of his eternal true body. However, the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant could no longer withstand Ning Fan's 6,000 combo of fist light. Finally, it let out a miserable shriek. Its origin was severely damaged, and its gigantic body was destroyed by Ning Fan. As long as his will was not destroyed, he would not die even if his body was destroyed. He forcefully turned his gigantic body into billions of broken lightning spirits and scattered in all directions. As long as one of his lightning spirits could escape back to the heavenly Tao, he could be reborn under the nourishment of the heavenly Tao. However, how could Ning Fan give the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant the chance to escape? It took him a lot of effort to destroy this troublesome lightning infant. How could he not collect some spoils of war? This Tao Destruction Lightning Infant was much stronger than the ancestral lightning sparrow that he captured in the past. If he uses it as the second spirit of the Tai Su lightning diagram, it would definitely increase the power of the diagram greatly. The Tao Destruction Lightning Infant could only be found by luck. It would be such a pity if he did not capture it. Freeze. Ning Fan pointed at the sky. The billions of broken lightning spirits in the sky were all stopped by his finger. None of them could escape. Capture. Amidst the fearful croaking sounds, Ning Fan unleashed the full power of the Tai Su lightning diagram. It turned into a gigantic cloud that blotted out the sky and devoured all the broken lightning spirits. After devouring all of the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant's clones, Ning Fan was not done yet. He even devoured all the tribulation lightning power of the 9-5 tribulation clouds into the Tai Su lightning diagram, causing the tribulation clouds to collapse in large areas. The 9-5 tribulation was a heavenly tribulation, as well as a form of fortune. Even though the cultivators who become emperors have a slim chance of surviving this tribulation, they could also gain a lot of insights during the process of resisting the tribulation lightning, which would be beneficial to their future cultivation in the emperor realm. That was why Ning Fan did not show himself at the first moment, as it would affect Luo Ho's comprehension of the tribulation. It was only until Luo Ho's heavenly tribulation was disrupted by someone that he showed up and helped him to prevent him from dying tragically under the heavenly tribulation. In the sky, hundreds and thousands of tribulation clouds collapsed one after another. As if he was annoyed by the slow speed of the tribulation clouds' collapse, Ning Fan blew another mouthful of air. It turned into a peerless astral wind and blew away even more tribulation clouds. In the end, the heavenly tribulation subsided. From the time he showed up to the time when the heavenly tribulation subsided, it did not even take the time for an incense stick to burn. In just the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant and the 9-5 Great Tribulation that everyone revered were all eliminated by him alone. For a moment, the entire place fell into dead silence. Only the peerless astral wind that Ning Fan casually blew out was still sweeping across heaven and earth. All the members of the foreign races who mocked Ning Fan's arrogance just now had their faces slapped. None of them expected that the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant, which even a quasi-Saint Realm expert was afraid of, was actually captured by Ning Fan so easily. Madman. He is definitely a madman. Let's not talk about whether the other quasi-saints have the ability to do so. Doesn't this young man know that by capturing the Tao Destruction Lightning Infant, he will become a thorn in the side of the last day's heavenly Tao, and will no longer be tolerated by heaven and earth? Brother Luo, the 9-5 lightning tribulation has passed. However, as far as I know, It seems like you still need to go into seclusion for another 45 days after the tribulation to comprehend the opportunity of the Tao Execution Mountain. Only then can you truly become an emperor. Brother Luo, quickly comprehend the mysteries of the Tao Execution Mountain. Just leave these foreign races to us. Fellow Taoist Ba Jing and the Three Sword Sovereigns, are you willing to join hands with Ning Fan and eliminate all the foreign races outside the pass? Haha. Of course we want to. Without fellow Taoist Ning, we definitely wouldn't dare to take the initiative to attack these foreign races. But now, we are very willing to help fellow Taoist Ning and teach these foreign races a bloody lesson. Not daring to be careless, the four immortal emperors responded to Ning Fan's invitation one after another. As a matter of fact, Ning Fan's current cultivation base had skyrocketed. Even if he has to fight against 9 of them alone, he was confident that he could defeat all of them. It was not difficult to defeat them. What was difficult was to kill all of the enemy's immortal emperors without letting any of them escape. If the immortal emperors wholeheartedly run away, it would be troublesome for Ning Fan to chase after them one by one. Since he had 4 immortal emperors as his helpers, why wouldn't he use them? With these 4 immortal emperors standing guard at the side, it would not be easy for the foreign race's immortal emperors to escape. Even though the Eastern Heaven immortal emperors were weak, they were not completely useless. Qi Ning Fan's giant golden flame body took the lead and charged into the army of foreign races. Each time he used the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike, tens of thousands of experts of the foreign races would be blasted into a rain of blood. 3/6 Tribulation immortal emperors from the Jade Shell clan, the Crab Soldier clan and the Rocky Reef clan surrounded Ning Fan, trying to stop him from slaughtering the foreign races. Ning Fan unleashed his full magic power. He threw out 3 punches of the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike that had achieved 6,000 combo attacks. With just a single blow, he destroyed the physical bodies of the 3 immortal emperors. Then, he used the divine refining cauldron to capture the demon souls of the 3 immortal emperors and refine them to death. He killed 3 of the 3 immortal emperors in just a single blow. This could no longer be considered as a battle against immortal emperors. It was completely a one-sided massacre. The other immortal emperors who wanted to attack Ning Fan immediately broke out in cold sweat. It was as if they were nailed to the ground. None of them dared to attack Ning Fan anymore. As immortal emperors, they could not help but tremble. They were terrified. The scene of Ning Fan killing the 3 immortal emperors with just a raise of his hand was too terrifying. It made them shiver. How can he kill immortal emperors like slaughtering dogs? This is impossible. He isn't an ancient immortal king. We, the immortal emperors of the Realm River, aren't trash either. Devil. He's a devil. We are no match for him. Even a quasi-saint realm expert would not be able to withstand his 6,000 consecutive attacks. That kind of ability only requires 7 to 8 punches to deplete all of our magic power. Why can he throw a few thousand punches without losing any magic power? Is his magic power really limitless? Is it the same as Lord Blood God? With him around, it's impossible for us to take over the Azure Sky Pass. Run. Run. If we run any slower, we will be killed by the white-robed Yama. Quickly retreat to the White Tiger Pass. All of a sudden, the morale of all the high-level experts of the foreign races collapsed. Countless of them scrambled to escape. Even immortal emperors were no match for Ning Fan. Any of the foreign races who had a little bit of spiritual intelligence was scared out of their wits by Ning Fan. How could they have the courage to continue fighting? Only those low-grade foreign races who had low spiritual intelligence and were indifferent to life and death could continue to attack Ning Fan without fear of death. However, the attacking speed of these low-grade foreign races was too slow. No matter how many of their attacks were, they could not hit Ning Fan at all. Since they could not keep up with Ning Fan's speed, their attacks were useless. Ning Fan's consecutive attacks continued to rise, reaching 7,000 and then 8,000. The 8,000 Ancient Devil's Mountain Breaking Strike was about to reach the limit of Ning Fan's eternal true body. The power of the Ancient Devil's Mountain Breaking Strike was not any weaker than the full-powered attack of a first-level quasi-saint. More and more low-grade foreign races were slaughtered by Ning Fan. Fresh blood dyed the surface of the river red. Another unlucky immortal emperor had his physical body destroyed and his demon soul refined to death. Ningfan's aura force was too strong. It was so strong that even the half-step quasi-saint realm expert with the highest cultivation base in this place could not help but break out in cold sweat when facing Ningfan, who was in a killing frenzy. Is this the magic power and aura force that a mere immortal king could possess? Why did he feel that Ningfan's magic power and chi were much stronger than many first-level quasi-saints? This young man actually suppressed him to the point that he could not breathe with just the chi of his magic power. One should know that he was a half-step quasi-saint realm expert. How could his magic power be weaker than an immortal king's? This was just too ridiculous. Facing Ningfan, who was charging at him in a menacing manner, this half-step quasi-saint realm expert instinctively wanted to avoid him. However, he remembered the great reward that the great divine priest had promised him and the Ziwei must-kill order. As long as I kill this young man, I will be able to obtain the opportunity to become a quasi-saint realm expert. Even though he had been a half-step quasi-saint realm expert for many years, he still could not take that final step with his own strength. If I can kill Ningfan. His breathing suddenly began to quicken. His heart was filled with greed. He felt an unprecedented excitement and thrill. He wanted to kill Ningfan and pave his path to the quasi-saint realm with Ningfan's blood and bones. I'm going all out. Myriad star formation open. As soon as he uttered a word, 10,000 zhong rays of starlight spread out from his body, engulfing the entire azure sky fortress. His immortal name was Wan Xingzi. He was a half-step quasi-saint realm expert of the Myriad Star Clan. The Myriad Star Clan was not good at fights of magical power. His combat strength could only be considered average among the other half-step quasi-saints. However, he had a bloodline inherited ability that was highly praised by the myriad clans in the World River. It was the Myriad Star Formation. It was a supreme immortal technique that the progenitor of the Myriad Star Clan had comprehended from immortal sovereign Ziwei. After the progenitor's death, this technique was not passed down on the surface. However, it was still passed down in the depths of the bloodline of every member of the Myriad Star Clan. It was just that very few of them could truly awaken this immortal technique. As for him, Wan Xingzi, he was one of the few lucky ones who was fortunate enough to awaken the Myriad Star Formation. By using meteorites as stars, it could illuminate the void. By using immemorial stars, it could illuminate samsara. By using living beings as stars, it could illuminate Ziwei. Myriad stars returned to purple. The immortal sovereign's finger. Wan Xingzi's eyes became filled with madness. Under the illumination of his starlight, the physical bodies of countless low-grade foreign races exploded. Their life force entered his starlight, dyeing it purplish red. Those immortal venerables and immortal kings who wanted to escape were attracted by his star power. Their eyes immediately became blank. Each of them was like a marionette, moving in a daze in the orbit of his star power. Their life force kept entering the star power. Other than Wan Xingzi, there were 4 other immortal emperors from the other clans. All of them were scared out of their wits by Ningfan. Initially, these immortal emperors also had the intention to retreat. However, when Wan Xingzi activated the Myriad Star Formation, their eyes also became blank. Being guided by the star power, each of them was like a walking corpse, flying in a daze around the orbit of the star power that Wan Xingzi drew. The scenery of heaven and earth changed completely at this moment. What entered Ningfan's eyes was no longer the azure sky pass, nor the realm river. The sky disappeared, the pass disappeared, the river disappeared, and the countless foreign races disappeared. The 8 scenery emperors who were hunting the low-grade foreign races behind him also disappeared. There was only one scenery left in his eyes. What entered his eyes were countless large planets moving along the orbit of the immortal domain. An ancient starry sky map of the immortal domain appeared in front of him. It gave off an incomparably dangerous chi, as if a supreme being was looking at him through this ancient starry sky map. Haha. What bullshit, white-robed Yama. Didn't you still fall into my Myriad Star Formation? No matter how high your cultivation base is, it will all go to waste once you enter this formation. You're dead for sure. Just wait for me to derive the immortal sovereign's finger and destroy your endless samsara. In the starry sky, Wan Xingzi's arrogant laughter reverberated continuously. Each time his laughter echoed, there would be boundless immortal power vibrating. Countless scenes of samsara that were related to Ning Fan were faintly discernible in the starry sky. Ning Fan felt a sharp pain in his sea of consciousness. At this moment, it was as if an ancient, cold finger that carried supreme majesty, disdain and coldness had opened his samsara. Chapter 1135. Ning Fan's sea of consciousness was in extreme pain. Countless broken images of his reincarnation flickered in and out of existence in the star formation. There were also countless noisy devil noises coming from all directions of the star formation. Each of them was like a clap of thunder, exploding in Ning Fan's ears. Ning Fan felt his ears buzzing nonstop. In just a few breaths, his eardrums were already injured by the devil sounds. Fresh blood flowed out from his ears. Once I defy the purple myrtle Tao, I will be killed by 10,000 stars after my star is destroyed. Unite the northern wilderness for thousands of years. Unite the northern wilderness for thousands of years. The devil voice that reverberated in Ning Fan's ears only consisted of these few sentences. However, because the person who uttered those words seemed to possess a supreme cultivation base, the devil voice was much more terrifying than the attacks of most quasi-saints. It easily injured Ning Fan, whose voice was that. It actually gave Ning Fan an unparalleled aura of the fourth step. Once I defy the purple myrtle Tao, I will be killed by 10,000 stars after my star is destroyed. Unite the northern wilderness for thousands of years. Unite the northern wilderness for thousands of years. Puff! That voice grew louder and louder. It was as if a fourth-step immortal sovereign was traversing through endless time and space to directly suppress Ning Fan. When the pressure reached its limit, Ning Fan spurted out a mouthful of blood. In the end, he was still injured. That injury couldn't be healed even with the power of the Wood Realm Master. However, this mouthful of blood and these injuries had stimulated his ferocious nature. Ning Fan attached great importance to Wan Xingzi, who was able to injure him. He thought to himself, this man is indeed worthy of being a half-step quasi-sage realm expert. He is indeed not on the same level as the 4-6 tribulation immortal emperors whom I have killed. He could not afford to be careless when facing this person. Currently, my strength is not comparable to a quasi-sage. I'm roughly equivalent to a peak existence of a half-step quasi-sage. For some reason, this person's divine power could activate a trace of a fourth-step expert's celestial power. Although it was only a trace, it was more than enough to attack a second-step cultivator. Today's battle is a proof. Sure enough, a half-step quasi-sage is not someone I can defeat unscathed. Your fourth-step celestial force is powerful, but you don't know that I also have such power. Ning Fan sneered. He was laughing because the myriad star array contained fourth-step immortal power. Could it be more than the God-exterminating shield? Roar! Ning Fan let out a devil roar. The power of the God-exterminating shield that had fused with his eternal true body was fully activated at this moment. This was not a battle between Ning Fan and a fourth-step existence. Ning Fan was not qualified to do so. This was the battle between the God-exterminating shield and a fourth-step immortal emperor as a heaven-opening treasure. He could even guess the source of the fourth-step immortal force in this myriad star formation. The enemy had only activated a tiny bit of Immortal Emperor Ziwei's immortal power. What he possessed was 1/6 of the complete God Destroyer shield. In terms of quantity, he was far superior to his opponent. As a result, Ning Fan's devil roar actually overpowered the devil voice of a fourth-step immortal sovereign in the myriad star formation. Impossible. This child's demonic voice actually overshadowed Empress Purple Myrtle's demonic voice. Wan Xingzi was extremely shocked, and he hardened his heart and pushed the myriad star formation to its limits. In the middle of the star array, the purple star myrtle suddenly exploded one after another. The chaotic star power swept across the sky, condensing into a finger shadow that covered the sky. That was the finger of an immortal sovereign that Wan Xingzi had deduced by deducing the star power. Of course, its power was not as strong as the true finger of an immortal king. However, it was definitely infinitely close to the attack of a quasi-Saint realm expert. It was enough to kill a weak immortal emperor with a single strike. The finger of an immortal sovereign, huh? You have the finger of a mortal emperor Ziwei, but I have the god exterminating protection. Ning Fan suddenly put his palms together. Golden flames immediately flew out from his body, turning into a gigantic golden flame shield that connected the sky and blocked the finger of the immortal sovereign. When the finger of the immortal sovereign pressed down on the golden flame shield, it only left a few cracks on it. It did not shatter the golden flame shield. Ning Fan had blocked the finger of the immortal sovereign. Impossible. This is already my strongest attack. I sacrificed the lives of countless of my companions to activate it. How is it possible for you to block it so easily? Wan Xingzi's mood instantly fell to the bottom. He could not believe the scene in front of him. Ning Fan did not care about Wan Xingzi's feelings. He admitted that Wan Xingzi was very strong. However, compared to him, he was still much weaker. If Wan Xingzi could perform a few more divinations on this level of the immortal sovereign's finger, he might really be able to harm him. Unfortunately, Wan Xingzi did not seem to have the remaining strength to prepare a second finger attack. If he only has the power to attack once, it was not worth mentioning at all. Collapse. Ning Fan threw out the ancient Devil Mountain breaking punch one after another. The starry world in front of him was shattered by him. The scene changed and returned to the real world. Seeing that Ning Fan had completely destroyed the myriad star formation, Wan Xingzi's fear towards Ning Fan rose to an unprecedented level. How would he still dare to fight Ning Fan? He turned around and fled. As for the other experts of the foreign races, all of them were implicated and killed by Wan Xingzi. The myriad star formation was a technique that harmed one's enemies but also oneself. In order to provide energy for the myriad star formation, countless experts of the foreign races had their life force sucked away by the star power. Currently, other than him, there were only 4 other immortal emperors of the foreign races who were still alive. However, all of them did not have much combat power left and were extremely weak. It was as if their strength had been drained by the myriad star formation. I'll leave these weak immortal emperors to fellow Taoists. I'll go after that half-step quasi-saint from the myriad star clan. Wan Xingzi fled too fast. Ning Fan did not have the time to care about the other enemies. Yun Yan locked onto the direction where Wan Xingzi fled and chased after him. As a half-step quasi-saint, Wan Xingzi's speed was naturally not slow. Unfortunately, Ning Fan was even faster. In just 10 breaths' time, he caught up with Wan Xingzi. This young man is just an immortal king realm cultivator, but his speed is actually faster than mine. Wan Xingzi was shocked. How would he still dare to flee on the surface of the water? His massive body dived into the river, trying to use the undercurrent to escape into the deep waters. Ning Fan sneered and chased after him to the bottom of the river in a flash. Once the foreign races entered the water, their speed would be greatly enhanced. Unfortunately, they were still not as fast as him. In another 10 breaths' time, Ning Fan caught up with Wan Xingzi for the second time in a remote area under the water. Wan Xingzi was both shocked and enraged. What an arrogant young man. How dare you chase me to the bottom of the river? If that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. After letting out a faint smile, Wan Xingzi spread out his spirit sense, which turned into countless message-transmitting flying swords. They flew in all directions, trying to seek help from the third group of immortal emperors and quasi-saints. How could Ning Fan give Wan Xingzi the chance to ask for help? His spirit sense turned into a waterfall and swept away all the message-transmitting flying swords. Humph! Even if you destroy my message-transmitting flying swords, the ripples from our battle is still enough to shock everyone. Forget it. I won't run anymore. Once I enter the water, my strength will increase by 30%. It won't be difficult for me to fight you for 2 hours. It's more than enough for me to wait for reinforcements. Wan Xingzi suddenly stopped moving forward. He let out a cold harumph and turned around abruptly. Then he spat out countless star arrows at Ning Fan. Ning Fan was already prepared. He ignored Wan Xingzi and destroyed all the star arrows with just a few casual punches. Then he approached Wan Xingzi and used the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike, sending Wan Xingzi flying backward with a muffled groan. He was slightly injured. Since the number of consecutive attacks had just started, even though the power of such punches could injure Wan Xingzi, it was not enough to seriously injure him. As a half-step quasi-Saint Realm expert, Wan Xingzi's skin and flesh were quite thick. However, the destructive power of the ancient devil mountain breaking strike still frightened Wan Xingzi. It was his first time facing the ancient devil mountain breaking strike head-on. In the past, he had only seen his companions being killed by the strike. It was nowhere as direct as experiencing it firsthand. According to what Wan Xingzi knew, the higher the number of consecutive attacks of Ning Fan's ancient devil mountain breaking strike, the more powerful it would be. Ning Fan had just started with a few punches, and he was already slightly injured. What would happen if the number of consecutive attacks kept increasing? However, as a half-step quasi-Saint Realm expert, he was not someone to be trifled with. Even though the myriad star formation was broken, he still had other trump cards which allowed him to fight Ning Fan for a while and wait for reinforcements. Myriad Star Immortality Technique. Wan Xingzi's body suddenly shone with dazzling starlight. Countless illusory Z-Way stars shone in the water. There were actually more than 1 million of them. Under the treatment of the starlight, Wan Xingzi's minor injuries were instantly healed. Starlight healing technique, huh? Ning Fan's eyes became slightly solemn. Wan Xingzi's star technique had actually reached the level of 1 million stars. He really should not be underestimated. Relying on the power of his star technique, Wan Xingzi was not afraid of the damage from the ancient devil mountain breaking strike. He swung his demon claws at Ning Fan's punches, clashing head-on with Ning Fan's fists. Ning Fan's consecutive attacks kept increasing. Each of his punches was fiercer than the previous one. However, Wan Xingzi's star technique was not weak either. Even the 3,000 consecutive attacks of the ancient devil mountain breaking strike could not kill Wan Xingzi with a single punch. It could only slightly injure him. After 4,000 consecutive attacks, Wan Xingzi began to struggle and his injuries gradually worsened. After 5,000 consecutive attacks, Wan Xingzi began to cough out blood frequently. After 6,000 consecutive attacks, Wan Xingzi even coughed out his golden sovereign blood. His physical body was about to explode from Ning Fan's attacks. From the start to the 6,000 consecutive attacks, he did not even use 100 breaths of time. Wan Xingzi was shocked and speechless. At first, he thought that it would not be a problem for him to last a few hours against Ning Fan after his strength had greatly increased after entering the water. However, the cruel reality told him that he did not even last 100 breaths of time against Ning Fan, and his physical body was already about to explode. This young man is just an immortal King Realm cultivator. How could he be so strong? Even though he was not as strong as a true quasi-Saint Realm expert, there were already not many first-grade half-step quasi-Saint Realm experts who could be a match for him. Life substitution technique. Wan Xingzi's demon eyes flashed with a hint of pain. He had used his last life-saving technique. He knew that if he did not use this technique, it would be impossible for him to last until the reinforcements arrived. He would certainly die in Ning Fan's hands. Bang! As soon as he used this technique, Wan Xingzi's physical body suddenly exploded into countless rays of starlight and disappeared. He actually ran away? Ning Fan was surprised. The magnetic force at the bottom of the water was too strong. The rain sense could not spread too far. He took out the treasure-searching compass to search for Wan Xingzi's whereabouts. As a result, he found out that after Wan Xingzi self-detonated once, he actually managed to travel a distance of several hundred days in an instant. Even if Ning Fan chased after him at full speed, he would still need a few days to catch up to him. It was no longer practical for him to chase after Wan Xingzi in the third path, which had a quasi-Saint Realm expert. Life substitution technique. What a strange life-saving technique. Sure enough, a half-step quasi-Saint Realm expert is not that easy to kill. Compared to those ordinary immortal emperors whom he killed, they were on a completely different level. The treasure-searching compass sensed that there were tens of powerful light specks nearby. All of them were rushing towards this place. Ning Fan did not plan to stay at the bottom of the water for long. He quickly returned to the surface. Even though Wan Xingzi managed to escape in this battle, It would not be easy for him to get out of the water again, because he had returned to the bottom of the water from the surface. Ning Fan threw Wan Xingzi to the back of his mind, and hurried back to the Azure Sky Fortress. At this moment, the 8 scenic emperors and the 3 sons of the Sword Mountain were engaged in a bitter battle, with 4 weakened immortal emperors of the foreign races. That's right. It was a bitter battle. Both sides had the same number of enemies. Even though the enemy's cultivation base was slightly higher, they were in a weakened state. In reality, the Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperors should have the upper hand. However, even though they had the upper hand, they were still caught in a bitter battle. They could not take down the 4 emperors of the foreign races while Ning Fan was away. It was enough to show how huge the gap between the Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperors and the foreign races Immortal Emperors was. Fellow Taoist Ning, you're back. Quickly help us take down these 4 emperors. The 8 scenic emperors and the others were overjoyed. Damn it! Why did the white-robed Yama return so quickly? Not good. Quickly dive into the water. The immortal emperors of the foreign races cursed their bad luck. Who would have thought that Ning Fan would return so quickly after chasing after Wan Xingzi? The 4 immortal emperors of the foreign races were filled with fear. Initially, they planned to bully the Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperors before Ning Fan returned. Now that Ning Fan had returned, they no longer had the mood to bully the Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperors. Immediately, they wanted to dive into the water to escape. 1/6 tribulation, 2/7 tribulation and 1/8 tribulation. How could Ning Fan let these foreign races escape? It was difficult to kill a half-step quasi-saint realm expert. How could he let these ordinary immortal emperors go? He raised his finger and used the heaven sealing technique. However, he realized that he could not stop the 4 emperors. He thought that they were probably wearing the East pacifying talisman that was given by the great divine priest of the foreign races. Haha, we have the East pacifying talisman. Your Eastern Heaven ancestral technique won't be able to stop us. The 4 immortal emperors of the foreign races burst into laughter. Before their laughter died away, they were caught by a huge net that covered the sky. Ning Fan scooped them up from the water as if he was catching fish. What kind of net is this? The 4 immortal emperors of the foreign races wanted to break free from Ning Fan's huge net. However, when they realized that they could not break free, how could they still laugh? If they were not mistaken, this net was actually a huge restraining net condensed by the power of the Wood Palm Realm. If it is used for recovery, the Wood Palm Realm could be used to recover magic power and heal injuries. If it is used for combat, the Wood Palm Realm would be the best supporting Dao Law to trap and restrain the enemy. So it can't trap these immortal emperors without the heaven sealing technique? Sorry, now that Ning Fan is the Wood Father God, he has more means to trap his enemies. The true power of the Wood Palm Realm was something that even 9 tribulation immortal emperors would be afraid of. Even if these 4 immortal emperors were in their peak condition, it would still be difficult for them to break free from the Wood Palm Realm. Now that they were in a weakened state, it was even more impossible for them to break free within a short period of time. I'll take your life while you're down. Ning Fan's eyes flashed with killing intent. He summoned the 7 treasures wondrous tree, and struck it at the 4 immortal emperors who were trapped. The 4 immortal emperors were trapped in the net, and had no way to escape. They could only brace themselves to resist the attacks of the 7 treasures wondrous tree. At this moment, the power of the 7 treasures wondrous tree had directly risen to another level in the hands of Ning Fan, the Wood Father God. Every time it struck the 4 immortal emperors, it was like a mid-grade innate magic treasure. Not long after that, the physical body of the 6th tribulation immortal emperor was destroyed and his demon soul was captured and destroyed. Another 100 breaths later, the other 2 7 tribulation immortal emperors were also killed by Ning Fan in the same way. Another 200 breaths later, the last 8 tribulation immortal emperor also sacrificed himself gloriously. The 8 scenery emperors and the others felt their scalps go numb. Those were immortal emperors whom they had fought hard against, but they were all killed by Ning Fan in just a few moves. Did he have to be so relaxed? Ning Fan was indeed worthy of being the 8th generation killing emperor, who was known as a monster. He was not someone ordinary people like them could be compared to. Perhaps only the outstanding immortal kings in the ancient times could be a match for the current Ning Fan. It's all thanks to fellow Taoist Ning's help that my Azure Sky Fortress is able to survive. We will never forget your great kindness. After the 8 scenery emperors and the others calmed themselves down, they cupped their fists at Ning Fan and expressed their gratitude. Ning Fan accepted their gratitude calmly. At this moment, being humble would only make him look hypocritical. He would even be suspected of deliberately showing off his achievements. By the way, did you manage to capture that half-step quasi-saint of the Myriad Star clan? The 8 scenery emperors asked a question that many cultivators guarding the fortress were concerned about. I couldn't capture him. He managed to escape. Ning Fan sighed, feeling deeply regretful. It was not that he did not try his best, but it was really not easy to kill a half-step quasi-saint. Besides, Wan Xingzi's life-saving means were too heaven-defying. Star lost life substitution technique. Ning Fan was doubtful. Even if he immobilized Wan Xingzi, trapped him or even killed him on the spot, he would still be able to preserve his life with this secret technique. Cultivators in the cultivation declining period were not worth mentioning. However, the abilities used by these immortal emperors of foreign races were all supreme immortal techniques inherited from the Z-Wei immortal domain. Thus, they should not be underestimated. Besides, what kind of existences were half-step quasi-saints? They were existences at the same level as Zhongyu, Afro, the dead emperor and light Buddha. As long as they were related to the word holy, they could no longer be treated lightly. How could they be killed so easily? It was true that Ning Fan had the strength to defeat a half-step quasi-saint, but he did not have the strength to capture a half-step quasi-saint alive. Capturing Afro alive that day was just a beautiful accident. It was impossible for such accidents to happen again and again. It's indeed a pity that I couldn't capture him in one go. However, fellow Taoist Ning, you don't have to worry about it too much. After all, the opponent is a half-step quasi-saint. Being able to defeat him and make him flee at the sight of you is enough to prove your capabilities. Besides, fellow Taoist has killed a total of 8 immortal emperors in this battle. It's really an eye-opener for us. After this battle, I'm afraid the third path can be conquered in one go. 8 of the immortal emperors of the foreign races are dead, and one of them has fled. There are no more immortal emperors of the foreign races on the surface of the third path. At this moment, there are only a group of low-grade immortal emperors guarding the White Tiger Pass. It's the best time for fellow Taoists to seize the pass. As for me, I will stay here to protect fellow Taoist Luo Ho. With me around, I will certainly not let anyone interrupt fellow Taoist Luo from comprehending the mysteries of the Dao Mountain. Alright. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoists to protect me while I assemble the army and send troops to the White Tiger Pass. We will take back the third waterway in one go. The 8 scenery emperors and the others were both happy and ashamed at the same time. They were happy because they finally had a chance to take back the third waterway which they had been fighting hard for dozens of years. They were ashamed because Ning Fan had just arrived and he easily accomplished something that they could not do for dozens of years. Now, all the cultivators in the Alliance army said that Ning Fan was the strongest expert in the Alliance army of the Border River. Their words were not false. Ning Fan stayed in the Azure Sky Pass. There were no more immortal emperors of the foreign races in the next pass, the White Tiger Pass. Thus, it did not matter much whether he participated in the battle or not. Even though the Eastern Heaven Immortal Emperor was weaker than the immortal emperors of the foreign races who were at the same level as him, it was still very easy for him to deal with the foreign races who were below the immortal emperor realm. If an immortal emperor still had a hard time dealing with low-grade immortal emperors, he would really have lived his life in vain. It was not difficult for Ning Fan to win the battle. However, he still suffered some injuries. Wan Xingzi was still a formidable figure. Being able to injure Ning Fan and escape with great difficulty, he was worthy of his half-step quasi-sage realm cultivation base. This man is just a half-step quasi-sage realm cultivator. If he's a real first-level quasi-sage realm cultivator, I would be the one who should run. My cultivation base has already attained the Immortal King realm in all 4 elements. The next step is to become an immortal emperor. In order to become an immortal emperor, I must pass the 9 great tribulations. To me, the Battle King's tribulation is quite meaningful to me. Ningfan patiently stayed in the Azure Sky Pass to protect Luo Ho. While he was observing Luo Ho's breakthrough to the Immortal Emperor realm, his own comprehension towards the Immortal Emperor realm was also increasing bit by bit. 6 days later, the 8 Scenery Emperors and the others recovered the White Tiger Pass and sent the news to the Azure Sky Pass. 45 days later, Luo Ho finished his comprehension and successfully severed the Dao Mountain. He officially advanced to the Immortal Emperor realm from the Immortal King realm and became a 6th Tribulation Immortal Emperor. Luo Ho, who was just an Immortal King, could already fight evenly against a 7 Tribulation Immortal Emperor. His aura force was not any weaker than that of an experienced 8 Tribulation Immortal Emperor, like the 8 Scenery Emperors. The current Luo Ho could definitely be considered as the main force of the Alliance army. Ha. This time, it's all thanks to Brother Ning's protection that I can safely advance to the Immortal Emperor realm. Brother Ning, oh Brother Ning, I really don't know how to thank you. It's a pity that I'm not a woman. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have to marry you. Luo Ho was in a good mood after successfully advancing to the Immortal Emperor realm. He was deeply touched by Ningfan's help. Of course, he would not thank Ningfan again. He had already regarded Ningfan as a friend who had gone through life and death with him. There was no need for him to be courteous when talking to Ningfan. Now that the knot in his heart had been untied, he began to joke with Ningfan calmly. Even if you're a woman, I still don't want you, Ningfan said helplessly. He had painstakingly helped his good friend transcend his tribulation, but his good friend actually did not behave properly. They were indeed a group of bad friends. However, he did not dislike such bad friends because he knew that if he was in danger during his tribulation, his good friend would certainly help him regardless of the cost. If you don't want me, do you want wine? I can consider wine. Just take it as a congratulation for your success in advancing to the Immortal Emperor realm. Cheers! Cheers! It was nighttime. Luo Ho was extremely drunk. Ningfan, on the other hand, was half drunk and half sober. He flew out of the Azure Sky Fortress under the cover of the night. The moment he left the fortress, he got rid of the smell of alcohol in his body. The 3rd water route had been completely taken back. Luo Ho had also successfully transcended his 9 great tribulation. However, Ningfan still had an unfinished business in the 3rd path. He still had to investigate the mysterious disappearance of Great Emperor Lai Jun. In order to protect Luo Ho, Ningfan had no choice but to delay until today to investigate this matter. He was very curious about how Great Emperor Lai Jun, a dignified 7th Tribulation expert, disappeared in the 3rd path without anyone noticing. According to the intelligence, Great Emperor Lai Jun went missing during his routine patrol. Since that's the case, I'll just investigate along the route he patrolled that day. As soon as he thought of this, Ningfan suddenly had a feeling of sudden inspiration. Immediately he was shocked. This time, sudden inspiration was a premonition of danger. There seemed to be something on the route Great Emperor Lai Jun patrolled that day that gave him a huge sense of danger. One had to know that his current self could even face a 1st-level quasi-saint without being defeated. He even had the strength to escape from a 2nd-level quasi-saint. Then what level of danger was it that could actually make him have a sudden inspiration? Ningfan's expression turned grim as he flew along the route he patrolled. No matter how dangerous the path ahead was, he must find out the reason behind Great Emperor Lai Jun's disappearance. This matter was entrusted to him by Emperor Tsong. He still had a good impression of Emperor Tsong. After all, Emperor Tsong had always taken good care of him. Chapter 1136. The night was boundless. The water of the Realm River was rippling, and the night breeze was slightly cold. Ningfan controlled the treasure-searching compass while flying close to the surface of the water. He followed the patrolling route of Great Emperor Lai Jun that day and moved further away from the Azure Sky Pass. Ningfan had planted a trace of Lai Jun's qi into the treasure-searching compass. Using it as an index, the compass could vaguely sense the whereabouts of Great Emperor Lai Jun. It was a very weak sense. It could only sense that Lai Jun was currently somewhere in the Realm River, but it could not sense his exact location for the time being. After flying for an unknown period of time, the compass suddenly pointed at the bottom of the river. Ning Fan remained silent for a moment. In the end, he decided to dive into the third path to find out what was going on. Of course, he would not dive in openly. He stood on the surface of the water and suddenly held his breath. At this moment, Ning Fan's chi suddenly changed. He no longer felt like a living person but a tree. He then transformed into the ghost face that he had not used for a long time, and dived into the bottom of the water. The immortal sovereign seal on the surface of the water actually did not sense anything. The immortal sovereign seal had determined that Ning Fan was an ordinary plant. Thus it did not sense anything. In that case, the low-grade foreign race members who were patrolling in the water did not notice that Ning Fan had gone into the water. The sense is starting to get stronger. It seems like Lai Jun is nearby. Ning Fan had no choice but to dive down to the bottom of the water. Just as he dived, he discovered a problem. He had been diving for more than 2 hours, but he still could not reach the bottom of the river. The river here is so deep. If it was any other place, he would only need to dive for 1 hour at most to reach the bottom of the water. The deeper the water, the more intense the sense of the treasure-searching compass became. The feeling of uneasiness in Ning Fan's heart also increased bit by bit. It was a premonition of danger. There must be something dangerous down there. Since it could make Lai Jun disappear without anyone noticing, I must not let my guard down. Ning Fan dived for another 4 hours, but he still could not see the bottom of the water. At this depth, there were no longer any low-grade foreign race members who were patrolling the area. There was no light at the bottom of the dark water. There were also no corals that could emit light in the surroundings. Ning Fan's eyes were covered with green light. Even though there was no light in the surroundings, his heavenly being eye could still see the scenery around him clearly. Fish bones, a lot of huge fish bones. Ning Fan discovered that there were countless gigantic fish bones floating in the water. There were also traces of gigantic creatures gnawing on the bones. After diving for several more hours, the number of fish bones began to decrease until they could no longer be seen. A fishy smell began to enter his nose. In order to steal the gloomy heavy wood, I've traveled almost the entire eastern boundary river, but I've never been to such a deep place. This place is like a bottomless pit in the Realm River. I have already dived for close to half a day, and I still can't feel the bottom of the water. Ning Fan raised his guard and continued to dive deeper. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 6 days passed, and he finally reached the bottom of the water. The water pressure at such a depth was already so heavy that even his divine spirit body found it hard to endure. Ning Fan's eyes widened in astonishment as he stared at the gigantic creature that occupied the bottomless pit of the Realm River. If the treasure-searching compass didn't sense wrongly, Lai Jun Di was currently in the stomach of this giant creature. It was a gigantic cuttlefish that emitted faint red light from its body. Currently, its eyes were open and it was snoring loudly like thunder. The body of this cuttlefish was too huge. Just its eyeball alone was as huge as an emperor-grade cultivation planet. If it stretches its body, it could cover the entire starry sky of an emperor-grade starfield. Its skin was too thick. It was so thick that even mid-grade innate magic treasures might not be able to break through its skin. Its blood and chi were just too vast. Ning Fan only knew that Black Rope's blood and chi could already be considered as one of the top experts in the era of Dharma decline. However, the blood and chi of this cuttlefish was actually several thousand times stronger than Black Rope. If the difficulty of killing a single Black Rope was comparable to killing several thousand immortal emperors, then the difficulty of killing this cuttlefish was comparable to killing several thousand Black Ropes. Ning Fan could not sense the specific cultivation level of this cuttlefish, but he could make a rough estimate. This cuttlefish should not have attained the third step yet. The fluctuation of its chi was also relatively large. It seemed like this cuttlefish was in a weakened state due to some unknown reason. When its chi was at its weakest, it only possessed the cultivation level of the Six Tribulations Eternal Era. When its chi was at its strongest, it seemed to be even stronger than Enmo and the strange eyeball that Ning Fan had seen before. When he sensed this, Ning Fan's expression could not help but change. He thought to himself, could this cuttlefish actually be an ancient great cultivator at its peak? The faint red light that the cuttlefish gave off made Ning Fan's heart turn cold. There's no mistaking it. This red light was clearly the extremely pure power of tribulation sense. The identity of this cuttlefish was actually a grand firmament tribulation spirit. An ancient great cultivator. A grand firmament tribulation spirit with a blood and chi that was several thousand times stronger than black ropes. Ning Fan was rather doubtful that there was any living creature in the era of Dharma decline that could be a match for this cuttlefish. Why is there such a terrifying existence sleeping at the bottom of the third path? Is this cuttlefish also a member of the foreign race's army? If that's the case, Ning Fan's expression turned extremely unpleasant. If everything was as he had guessed, the situation would be troublesome. Is there anyone in the entire Eastern Heaven who could be a match for this cuttlefish? Even if all the cultivators of the Eastern Heaven were to attack together, they probably would not be able to kill this cuttlefish. No wonder he had a sudden impulse. No wonder he felt a sense of danger. Fortunately, this cuttlefish was currently sleeping and did not notice his approach. Otherwise, Ning Fan did not have the confidence to escape from this cuttlefish. This is, the blood god is even darker. This is, the blood god is even darker. The ability to communicate with all living beings allowed Ning Fan to listen to the voice of the surrounding river water. The river water was telling Ning Fan the identity of this cuttlefish. This is, the blood god is even darker. Blood god. Ning Fan was not unfamiliar with this title. In the beginning, in order to steal the Een heavy wood, he disguised himself as a fish and sneaked into the foreign races. Thus he often heard this name. According to what he knew, the foreign races in the eastern Jia River worshipped a god, and called him the blood god. The blood god was the belief of the foreign races in the eastern Jia River. This kind of belief was even higher than the worship they had for the great divine priest. In the past, Ning Fan only thought that the so-called blood god was an existence of religious belief, and it was not a real existence. However, at this moment his thoughts changed. This cuttlefish that was as large as the starry sky in front of him was probably the Lord Blood God that the foreign races in the eastern Jia River worshipped. The blood god is even darker. Gung Wu must be the name of this cuttlefish. Ning Fan's eyes were filled with struggle. He had clearly detected that Emperor Jun was inside the cuttlefish's abdomen. However, he did not have the ability to break open the cuttlefish's abdomen and rescue Emperor Jun. He did not know how to report this matter to Emperor Tsang. He also did not know if there was really someone who could defeat this giant cuttlefish and rescue Emperor Jun in this Dharma-ending era. No. Perhaps there is someone who can match this cuttlefish. If it is an outstanding expert among the great ancient emperors, he would certainly be able to do it. Ning Fan's eyes lit up. If Great Emperor Ancient Chaos is here, he would certainly have a way to deal with this cuttlefish and rescue Emperor Jun. But where is Great Emperor Ancient Chaos? Ning Fan felt a headache again. According to the information he obtained, Great Emperor Ancient Chaos had come to the eastern Jia River after leaving the Divine Tomb. However, Ning Fan did not find Great Emperor Ancient Chaos even after searching the entire eastern Jia River. Obviously, Great Emperor Ancient Chaos was no longer in the eastern Jia River. He had already left and no one knew where he went. It was impossible to ask Great Emperor Ancient Chaos for help in rescuing Emperor Jun. Just as Ning Fan was pondering, a sudden change occurred. Somehow, the giant cuttlefish woke up all of a sudden. Its giant eyes were filled with vigor, and it locked onto Ning Fan's direction with ferocious flames. Shilululululu? Is there food coming to my door? It's actually talking to itself. Ning Fan's expression changed. Just as he was about to execute a method to escape from this place, the giant cuttlefish revealed an extremely adorable expression at the next moment. It withdrew all of its killing intent and let out a strange, lazy laugh. Lulu 1111. Lulu 11 Lu Sisi Lulu. Lulu hoo hoo hoo. It's not food. It's a companion of the tribulation spirit. Looks like I haven't woken up yet, and I'm still dreaming about my hometown. Forget it. I'll go back to sleep. The ferocious flames in the giant cuttlefish's eyes dimmed. It turned its body and fell asleep again. Due to its massive size, Just a simple flip of its body was enough to trigger the most terrifying tsunami in this uninhabited deep water area. The strong water current nearly sent Ning Fan flying. The cuttlefish had indeed seen Ning Fan. However, it ignored him. It was because it recognized the scent of Ning Fan's Tai Tsung tribulation spirit. With its limited spiritual intelligence, it thought that it was definitely daydreaming when it saw other tribulation spirits of the grand firmament realm. Therefore, it did not pay much attention to this matter, and treated Ning Fan's arrival as a dream. Ning Fan used all of his strength to barely withstand the impact of the ocean current, and stabilized his body. He remained silent and stared at the giant cuttlefish, falling into deep thought. If it were someone else, they certainly would not know what the cuttlefish was talking about. However, he could understand it. As expected, this cuttlefish was a tribulation spirit of the grand firmament realm. Moreover, it did not seem to be very smart. It was prone to getting muddle-headed, and could not even differentiate between reality and dreams when it is sleeping. Looking at the giant cuttlefish's mouth that was talking in its sleep, Ning Fan suddenly had a bold idea. He certainly could not defeat this cuttlefish in a fight. However, what if he sneaks into the cuttlefish's stomach? As an ancient grand cultivation realm being, this cuttlefish's senses were naturally extremely sharp. It could even sense Ning Fan's presence when he got close to it. It would open its sleepy eyes and see through Ning Fan's invisibility. If Ning Fan invades its body, there was no guarantee that it would not wake up completely. In a fit of rage, it would directly digest Ning Fan. Sneaking into the cuttlefish's stomach to save Ning Fan seemed to be very dangerous. However, it seemed like he could only do it secretly. Ning Fan certainly could not defeat this cuttlefish in a head-on fight. Ning Fan did not have much of a relationship with Emperor Lai Jun. However, since they were both cultivators of the Eastern Heaven, it would be somewhat unreasonable for him to not save Emperor Lai Jun. The life and death of a stranger could not move his heart. However, it was different for his comrades who were bathed in blood and fought alongside him. The oath of the Realm River meeting was still ringing in his ears. As long as Emperor Lai Jun wholeheartedly protects the Eastern Heaven, he would be Ning Fan's brother. It was impossible for Ning Fan to not save him. After a long time, Ning Fan's eyes turned solemn. He finally made a decision. He no longer concealed himself. After all, the cuttlefish could still see him even if he concealed himself. Why bother? He suppressed his cultivation base, and used the chi of the Grand Firmament Realm Tribulation Spirit as the main source. His entire body was covered in red light. Dressed in white robes and emitting a faint red light, Ning Fan approached the cuttlefish bit by bit. Perhaps it was because Ning Fan's tribulation spirit chi gave the cuttlefish a sense of intimacy. Even though it could vaguely sense that Ning Fan was getting closer to it, it did not open its eyes again. It also did not put up any guard to stop Ning Fan from getting closer. Upon seeing this, Ning Fan secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He now had more confidence in sneaking into the cuttlefish's body. The danger of this move was even a few times greater than him challenging all the immortal emperors and quasi-saints in the Eastern Realm River alone. As long as he takes a wrong step, what awaits him would be being killed by this cuttlefish. However, that was his nature. As long as he made up his mind on something, he would not hesitate to do it no matter how dangerous it is. He's getting closer. He's getting closer. It would not be difficult for the cuttlefish to swallow tens of cultivation planets in a single gulp. Relying on his identity as the Grand Firmament Tribulation Spirit, Ning Fan swam all the way to the cuttlefish's mouth without causing any resistance. Seeing this, Ning Fan's confidence grew by a lot. He took a deep breath and felt as if he had entered the cuttlefish's black hole. This cuttlefish's body was too huge. Ning Fan had clearly just entered its body, but it felt like he had entered a vast and desolate starry sky. No, it was not accurate to say that it was desolate. Ning Fan discovered all kinds of strange things inside the cuttlefish's body. First of all, Ning Fan discovered that there were countless leech-like parasites growing inside the cuttlefish's body. They were not ordinary leeches. Instead, they were existences as large as mountains. Those leeches sustained their lives by sucking the cuttlefish's vast blood chi. There were more than millions of them. Any one of them had a cultivation base comparable to a true immortal realm cultivator. Some of the stronger ones could even fight against an immortal Emperor realm cultivator. This made Ning Fan fearful. However, he had already encountered more than 40 immortal Emperor realm leeches along the way. If all of them attack him at the same time, he could only protect himself with all his might. Fortunately, the leeches here did not attack Ning Fan. They did not sleep together with their host. Instead, each of them stared at Ning Fan with eyes that were as large as copper bells. They did not know whether Ning Fan was another food for their host. They only knew that the chi of the Grand Firmament Tribulation spirit on Ning Fan's body was very similar to their host's. The cuttlefish's strength made them unable to resist. Even when facing Ning Fan, who was a Grand Firmament Tribulation spirit, they did not dare to act presumptuously or attack him. In other words, Ning Fan was the only one who could make them fear him. If it's some other food, hee. Ning Fan remained unscathed along the way and entered deeper into the cuttlefish's abdomen. Over there, Ning Fan saw all kinds of strange things being swallowed by the cuttlefish. There were giant sunken ships, the remains of ancient cultivators, an abandoned city whose architectural style was obviously not the style of the Four Heavens, and a cultivation planet that had been abandoned for an unknown number of years. This cuttlefish really eats everything. Ning Fan was deeply speechless. The deeper he went into the abdomen, the stronger the stench of decay in the surroundings. He did not know how long he had been moving forward. Suddenly, a ray of blood light soared into the sky. According to the treasure-searching compass, Lai Jun was in that direction. Ning Fan raised his guard and entered the range of the blood-red light. At the moment he entered the area, countless blood-red tentacles suddenly attacked him from all directions. Each of the tentacles carried the full power of a 9 Tribulation Immortal Emperor's attack. However, after sensing the chi of a Tribulation spirit on Ning Fan's body, those tentacles suddenly calmed down. They no longer attacked Ning Fan, and allowed him to move forward. Ning Fan heaved a sigh of relief. If these tentacles do not stop attacking him, he would have no choice but to counterattack with all his strength in order to not be tied up by them. The identity of the Grand Firmament Tribulation spirit was unexpectedly useful in this place. In other words, he could enter the cuttlefish's abdomen unscathed. Other food would not have such good luck. Ning Fan's eyes scanned the surroundings. In the depths of this blood light, there were no less than 10 billion tentacles. Most of the tentacles were entangled with something. Spiritual herbs, magic treasures, cultivators, experts of the foreign races. These tentacles were the digestive organs of this cuttlefish. They could digest all the food that the cuttlefish swallows. Speaking of which, isn't this cuttlefish the Lord Blood God that the foreign races worship? Why does it even eat the foreign races? Speaking of which, there seems to be a lot of good stuff in the cuttlefish's abdomen. There are rare spiritual herbs, emperor-grade pills, and even innate magic treasures. I wonder where it swallowed all of them from. Ning Fan did not go to steal the treasures in the cuttlefish's abdomen. He did not want to cause unnecessary trouble. After all, it was already a huge risk to save Lai Jun alone. With the help of the treasure-searching compass, Ning Fan quickly found Lai Jun's location. Lai Jun's entire body was entangled by the tentacles. He could not move at all and was unconscious. When he was unconscious, he was still talking in his sleep with fear in his eyes. Don't eat me. Don't save me. Save me. I don't want to be eaten. I don't want to be eaten. The fear contained in those words was not an act. Lai Jun seemed to have been traumatized by being eaten by the cuttlefish. Ning Fan tried to pull Lai Jun's body out of the entanglement of the tentacles. It was obvious that the tentacles were unwilling to let go of Lai Jun, who was a delicious food. Ning Fan did have a way to cut off the tentacles and save Lai Jun. However, doing so would inevitably cause him pain, and there was a possibility that the cuttlefish would wake up. After trying 100 times, Ning Fan still could not pull Lai Jun's physical body out of the tentacles. Without any other choice, Ning Fan could only give up on Lai Jun's physical body. He made a bloody hole on his dantian, and directly pulled out his primordial spirit. The small face of Lai Jun's primordial spirit looked weak. Ning Fan's destructive actions and the tentacles that had been feeding on him for many days had definitely brought him quite a lot of damage. Even his Tao cultivation foundation had been damaged. Amidst the pain, the small face of Lai Jun's primordial spirit slowly opened its sleepy eyes. As soon as it saw Ning Fan, it revealed a silly smile and its eyes were blank. Who are you? Are you here to save me? I'm saved. I'm saved. There was not a single word of gratitude. There was not the slightest bit of calmness. He did not have the demeanor of an immortal emperor. Because he was overly afraid of the cuttlefish, Lai Jun was actually scared silly. What kind of terrifying experience must he have gone through to be able to stun an immortal emperor? Ning Fan did not know whether he should despise Lai Jun or pity him. He still remembered the day when Lai Jun came to the meeting at the border river. He was in high spirits as if he was eager to start an all-out war against the foreign races. Today, however, he was scared out of his wits by the foreign races and became a fool. Ning Fan sighed and ignored Lai Jun's silly words. He activated his illusion technique to make him fall asleep again. Then he kept his primordial spirit and quietly left the cuttlefish's stomach. After another 6 to 7 days, Ning Fan swam back to the surface of the water. Only when he saw the layers of immortal sovereign's seals on the surface of the water did he feel somewhat relieved. As long as immortal sovereign Zido's seals were still on the surface of the border river, that terrifying cuttlefish would not be able to chase him out of the water and cause no harm to the living beings in the water. The immortal sovereign seals would never allow such a supreme existence to come to the surface of the water. Looking at the layers of seals, Ning Fan fell into silence. On the day when Lai Jun went missing while patrolling, he must have dived into the water for some reason and got caught by that cuttlefish. Thinking about how many living beings in the natural world had ways to attract their prey, Ning Fan inwardly guessed that the cunning cuttlefish might have used some methods to attract Lai Jun into the water in order to find food. Forget it. Ning Fan was actually not really concerned about how the cuttlefish attracted its prey. What he was more worried about now was how to deal with Lai Jun, who was scared silly. If the cultivators of the Alliance find out that there was a terrifying cuttlefish that could scare Lai Jun silly at the bottom of the third path, their morale would probably be greatly affected. Should I make Lai Jun's matter public? Forget it. Why should I worry about this? It's better to let Emperor Tsong and the other higher-ups of the Alliance worry about this matter. I just need to focus on killing the enemies. To think that such a terrifying creature is actually hiding at the bottom of the border river. No matter what, I must not let the immortal sovereign's seals be destroyed. No matter what, I must repair the immortal sovereign's seals. Once this giant cuttlefish escapes from the border river, what awaits the cultivators of the eastern heaven would be a catastrophe. Chapter 1137. The news of the third waterway being pacified quickly spread throughout the entire eastern Jia River. As far as the eastern sky cultivators were concerned, this news naturally greatly boosted their morale. As for the outsiders, this was bad news. At this moment, within the Vermilion Bird Pass of the ninth waterway, a group of immortal emperors of the outsiders had gathered together. All of them had solemn expressions on their faces as they discussed this matter. Many of the immortal emperors of the foreign races were shocked by Ning Fan's strength. The third water path that the other cultivators of the eastern heaven could not reclaim even after several tens of years was already done by Ning Fan, just after he arrived here. The white-robed king of hell, humph. What a powerful white-robed king of hell. He had killed 8 immortal emperors and chased away a half-step quasi-sage. Now that the Boundary River quasi-sage had not appeared, who could stop him? This is troublesome. The white-robed king of hell is unstoppable. After taking over the third route, his next target is likely to be our 9th route. If that's the case, how will the plan work? Difficult. With the immortal emperor's seal, the quasi-sage seniors of the 9th path can't come out of the water to help us guard the pass. Currently, in the Vermilion Bird Pass, there was only fellow Taoist Wan Sheng, a half-step quasi-sage, and 13 immortal emperors. The overall strength of the Vermilion Bird Pass wasn't much stronger than the White Tiger Pass. What's more troublesome is that fellow Taoist Wan Sheng is currently in seclusion and has yet to come out. If that white-robed king of hell comes, we won't be a match for him. Fellow Taoist Wan Sheng is actually still in seclusion. The fire is already burning his eyebrows, yet he can still sit still. The remnants of Zido's clan have clearly been annihilated, so why is it still able to give birth to such a heaven-defying expert of the younger generation? He's simply not inferior to an ancient immortal king. The heavens are blind. Why wasn't this child born in my purple myrtle lineage? The heavens are unfair. Humph. What's the point of saying all this nonsense now? We should quickly think of a countermeasure. If the white-robed king of hell comes here, we definitely won't be a match for him. Since fellow Taoist Wan Sheng is not here, I will step out of my place and help fellow Taoist Wan Sheng make a decision. In my opinion, we should ask the great divine priest for help, and have the sixth path send a half-step saint to help us guard the pass. We'll definitely be able to suppress him if we have two half-saints with us. The current situation is unfavorable. How can the sixth route send reinforcements? Although we have a lot of troops there are only 3 half-step quasi-sages guarding that place. I heard that the sixth path suffered a defeat a few days ago, and one of its 3 half-saints was heavily injured by the Clear Sky White Jade building. The army had no choice but to temporarily retreat to the Black Tortoise Pass and defend the pass with their lives. The white-robed king of hell must not be underestimated, but the Clear Sky White Jade building was not an ordinary person either. Even if we ask for reinforcements, I'm afraid that the sixth route won't be able to send a half-saint to support us. Damn it. How hateful. If it weren't for the restriction of the Boundary River seal, we wouldn't have to worry about the lack of support from half-saints and quasi-saints. We wouldn't have to fear a mere white-robed king of hell. Whatever. If that white-robed king of hell really dares to come to the ninth path, this old man will be the first to fight him. No matter what, we can't tarnish the reputation of Ziwei. The group of immortal sovereigns of the foreign races kept cursing and swearing. Their words were filled with endless fear towards Ning Fan. Sitting below the foreign race emperors were 3 Eastern Heaven immortal emperors, Madame Gui Hua, Dongling Immortal Wang, and Emperor Mo He. These 3 immortal emperors had betrayed the alliance and joined the foreign races. Now they were under the orders of the great divine priest of the foreign races, to assist in the defense of the Vermilion Bird Pass. In name they were supposed to assist in the defense, but in reality, they were just slaves of the foreign races. In such a meeting, the 3 of them could only listen. They had no right to interrupt. At this moment, the expressions of the 3 emperors were ugly. Their expressions were filled with unconcealable fear. What they feared was that Ning Fan might come to attack the ninth path. If Ning Fan really comes to the ninth path, wouldn't they, the traitors of the Eastern Heaven, be in danger? Perhaps they would end up like Emperor Primordial Pill, bearing the brunt of the attack and being killed by Ning Fan. Fellow Taoist Emohi, what should we do now? I heard that Ning Fan can kill 8 immortal sovereigns with just a raise of his hand and chase away a half-saint in 100 breaths. He is no longer the weak ant he was in the past. Killing us is as easy as flipping his palm. If he comes to the ninth path, he certainly won't let us go. Are we going to stay in the Vermilion Bird Pass with these foreign races and wait for our deaths? Dongling Immortal Wang secretly transmitted his voice to Emperor Mo He and Madame Gui Hua. Dongling Immortal Wang was a 7 Tribulation Immortal Emperor, while Maha was just a 6 Tribulation Immortal Emperor. However, when Dongling spoke to Emperor Mo He, his tone carried a hint of respect, as if he was trying to please Maha. After we betrayed the foreign races, the great divine priest planted a death seal on us. If we escape from the Vermilion Bird Pass, the death seal will definitely take effect. The death seal. Death seal. Traitors must die. We can only go all the way and defend the Vermilion Bird Pass with these foreign races. Emperor Mo He said perfunctorily. Fellow Taoist Maha, please don't use such perfunctory words to brush us off. According to what we know, you are the same as fellow Taoist Primordial Pill. Both of you are in contact with the Dark Race and the Devil Conferral Summit. A mere death seal shouldn't be a problem for fellow Taoist. If it wasn't for fellow Taoist tempting me to betray the foreign races, I wouldn't dare to do such a thing no matter how courageous I am. Now that a great calamity is upon us, fellow Taoist, you have to be responsible for me. Madame Gui Hua looked at Emperor Mo He with a charming smile. The death seal really isn't a problem for me. Fine. Seeing that you've served me well, I'll help you. If that Ning brat really attacks the ninth path, I'll bring the two of you to northern heaven. Maha stared at Madame Guihua's delicate body. His smile became a little frivolous as if he had thought of something. Dongling Immortal Wang and Madame Guihua were stunned. Then they asked with deep meaning. Northern heaven? Could it be that the main forces of the dark race and the devil conferral summit are in northern heaven? Hehe. The heavenly secrets must not be revealed. All right. If fellow Taoists can break the death seal, I'll follow you to northern heaven after that brat attacks the ninth path. In the future, I'll follow fellow Taoists' lead and I won't regret it. Haha. Very good. Very good. Shh. Be quiet. That myriad Saint Dragon King seems to be coming out of seclusion. What a huge commotion. As expected of a half-step sage. Maha and the others who were plotting something suddenly stopped smiling. Their conversation was disrupted by a deafening dragon roar. As soon as they heard the dragon roar, all the experts of the foreign races were overjoyed. They knew that myriad Saint Dragon King, who had been in seclusion for a long time, had finally come out. Congratulations, fellow Taoist myriad saint. Judging from your aura, it seems like you've gained a lot from your seclusion. Aha! I've indeed gained a lot. During this seclusion, I've cultivated the 10 heads technique of Saint Rubble to the 8th level. Myriad Saint Dragon King laughed heartily. He seemed to be in a good mood. As soon as Myriad Saint Dragon King said that, all the immortal emperors of the foreign races were shocked. You've actually cultivated it to the 8th level. In that case, doesn't it mean that no one below the 2nd level quasi-sage realm can kill you? Even if fellow Taoist hasn't truly broken through to the quasi-sage realm, you're invincible against anyone below the quasi-sage realm with just your 8 heads technique. With fellow Taoist here, that white-robed Yama is nothing. Fellow Taoist myriad saint, please take down that white-robed Yama. Let that brat know the power of my Z-Way immortal cultivation. Dragon King Wansheng's brows twitched. He was puzzled. Who was the white-robed king of hell? He had never heard of this name before. He went into seclusion before Ning Fan became famous. Naturally, he did not know that the so-called white-robed Yama was referring to Ning Fan. Seeing that Dragon King Wansheng did not know who Ning Fan was, one of the experts of the foreign races immediately explained Ning Fan's ferocious reputation and battle achievements to him. As soon as Dragon King Wansheng heard that Ning Fan was able to kill immortal emperors as if he was slaughtering dogs despite having a cultivation base at the immortal king realm, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. However, myriad Saint Dragon King was also a prideful person. Besides, he had cultivated the 8th head of the 10 heads technique. Thus he was not afraid of Ning Fan. He was confident that he was invincible below the quasi-sage realm. Even a second-step quasi-sage would find it hard to kill him. A mere Ning Fan was not worth mentioning. What bullshit, white-robed Yama King. It's fine if this kid doesn't come to the 9th path, but if he dares to, then I'll turn him into the dead Yama King. On the other side, the morale of the variant humans was greatly boosted by the appearance of Dragon King Wansheng. Right at this moment, a pitch-black demonic cavity suddenly appeared in the sky above Vermilion Bird Pass without any warning. Demonic cavity? An ancient devil at the peak devil conferral realm? Is he an enemy or a friend? All the immortal emperors of the foreign races including Dragon King Wansheng were shocked, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Only some ancient devils that had inherited their lineage from the ancient times knew how to use the demonic cavity. Now that a demonic cavity had appeared, a powerful devil would certainly descend. They must be careful. Heavenly Emperor Emohi, however, seemed to know who the newcomer was. As soon as he saw the demonic cavity, he was overjoyed. He said to myriad Saint Dragon King, "Everyone, don't worry. This person is not an enemy. He is the reinforcement that I have invited from the northern heaven." Oh, reinforcement. All the experts of the foreign races were overjoyed when they heard that the newcomer was their reinforcement. They could only blame Ning Fan for being too famous. Even if myriad Saint Dragon King had comprehended the 8 heads technique, their hearts were still beating rapidly. They did not have full confidence that they could defeat Ning Fan. However, if they have an ancient devil who had comprehended the demonic cavity as their reinforcement, the situation would undoubtedly become more advantageous. If they did not sense wrongly, the newcomer seemed to be a half-saint ancient devil. In that case, the Vermilion Bird Pass would have 2 half-saints guarding it. No matter how strong Ning Fan was, could he defeat 2 half-saints at the same time? The Vermilion Bird Pass was safe. I am Xianwei. My elder brother is Taoist Bai Zhu. A burly ancient devil walked out of the demonic cavity and arrived at the Vermilion Bird Pass. He then said to the experts of the Vermilion Bird Pass proudly, "What? The famous Taoist Xianwei, the junior brother of Taoist Bai Zhu, a half-saint. He was a powerful devil-sealing puppet in ancient times. He had once killed a true half-saint realm expert." As soon as they heard the devil's name, all the experts of the foreign races were shocked. Even the prideful myriad Saint Dragon King was a little reserved in front of this devil. They could only blame the fact that the newcomer's reputation was too great. He was an old devil who was famous in ancient times. He was not someone that a cultivator in the cultivation decline like him could compare to. Myriad Saint Dragon King secretly calculated in his mind. Even though he had mastered the 8 heads technique, his chances of winning against fellow Taoist Xianwei's green wave fire poison was still less than 30%. This person is very strong. But this is also good. With this person here, I don't have to worry about that white-robed Yama anymore. Oh right, what's that white-robed Yama's name again? Ning. I forgot. The 8 heads technique really does damage a cultivator's memory. But forget it. I don't care what that white-robed Yama's name is. He's not worthy of my attention. This young man will never be able to shake the Vermilion Bird Pass. Ning Fan did not know that his people had already caused a wave of panic among the foreign races on the 9th path, even before they arrived at the 9th path. He also did not know why the Devil Conferral Summit even sent an ancient devil half-step saint to assist the defense of the 9th path in order to deal with him. The white-robed Yama who had risen to fame. After settling the matter regarding Emperor Lai Jun, Ning Fan bid farewell to Luo Ho and the others and left the 3rd path. After much consideration, Ning Fan handed Emperor Lai Jun the primordial spirit of Emperor Lai Jun. He was not a babysitter. He did not have time to take care of such a cowardly immortal emperor. Luo Ho and the others would take care of the follow-up matters regarding the 3rd path. He did not need to worry about it, and he was also too lazy to interfere. As soon as he finished dealing with the matters in the 3rd path, he quickly left the 3rd path and rushed to the 9th path. The waterways that he had yet to recover were only the 6th waterway that connected to the northern heaven, and the 9th waterway that connected to the southern heaven. Among them, the 6th waterway had more immortal emperors while the 9th waterway had fewer immortal emperors. Adhering to the principle of doing things easy first and difficult later, Ning Fan decided to set recovering the 9th waterway as his next goal. The 9th waterway was the second last pass, the Myriad Saints Pass. The reason why this pass was called the Myriad Saints Pass was to commemorate a heroic deed. Countless years ago, when an Eastern Heaven immortal emperor was guarding this pass, he was attacked by Dragon King Myriad Saint. Dragon King Myriad Saint was a famous old monster of the 9th waterway. He was very strong and that Eastern Heaven immortal emperor was no match for him. However, that Eastern Heaven immortal emperor still decided to defend the pass with his life. In the end, he sacrificed himself to protect the other cultivators who were guarding the pass. Even though the famous Dragon King Myriad Saint killed that Eastern Heaven immortal emperor, one of his dragon horns was cut off by that immortal emperor. The wound was filled with resentment, and the broken horn could not be regrown until now. It was said that the reason why the formation of the Myriad Saints Pass was so powerful was because it had integrated the power of Myriad Saints' broken horn. Currently, the Divine Void Emperor and the other Eastern Heaven immortal emperors were guarding the Myriad Saints Pass. When Ning Fan arrived at the Myriad Saints Pass, he was surprised to find that the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor, who had always been polite to him on the surface, actually came out of their pass with great enthusiasm just to welcome him. The Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor even took out countless rare and precious spiritual fruits and spiritual wine, and held a grand banquet just to welcome Ning Fan. In the cultivation world, strength was the only thing that mattered. When Ning Fan was just a puny life immortal realm cultivator, and a true immortal realm cultivator, the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor did not put him in their eyes at all. They even humiliated themselves by bullying the weak, and made things difficult for Ning Fan. Later on, with the protection of Great Emperor Ancient Chaos, the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor became much more polite to Ning Fan. However, the source of their politeness was only because they respected the Ancient Chaos. Later on, because Ning Fan was on good terms with Xiang Bozi, he obtained the full support of the Godly Void Pavilion. As the pillar of the Godly Void Pavilion and the disciple of Xiang Bozi, the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor became even more polite to Ning Fan. However, that kind of politeness still did not come from the bottom of their hearts. It was only until Ning Fan became the Sha Emperor and performed the magnificent feat of killing an immortal emperor during the Emperor conferring ceremony that the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor genuinely regarded him as their peer for the first time. After that, Ning Fan went to the dark races alone and retreated unscathed. Ning Fan took part in the meeting of the Realm River and sent his troops to 11 different routes. He killed the immortal emperors of the foreign races time and time again. Recently, Ning Fan actually defeated a half-step saint and killed 8 immortal emperors all by himself. The Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor were unwilling to admit it, but they had no choice but to admit that the current Ning Fan's strength had far exceeded theirs. They could only look up to him in admiration. Today, even if the two emperors came out together to welcome Ning Fan alone, they no longer felt humiliated. Instead, they felt that this was how it should be. Ning Fan had the strength to make them treat him with respect. During the banquet, everyone toasted each other. Ning Fan was not a narrow-minded person. Since the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor took the initiative to express their goodwill to him, he would not let them lose face. No matter what kind of grudges they had with each other in the past, they only had one identity at the moment. They were brothers who guarded the Realm River together. They were comrades. In the face of righteousness, small grudges were not worth mentioning. Of course, with what happened in the past, it was impossible for Ning Fan to sincerely befriend the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor. Compared to feigning civility with the Divine Void Emperor and the Divine Void Emperor, he preferred to drink and chat merrily with LV Feng and Yun Lei. LV Feng and Yun Lei were both guest elders of the Divine Void Pavilion. Naturally, they would accompany the Divine Void Emperor and guard the 9th path. With the two of them drinking with Ning Fan did not feel that the banquet was boring at all. LV Feng and Yun Lei were his friends when he was still insignificant. Their sincerity towards each other was incomparable to the others. Of course, compared to drinking, Ning Fan was more concerned about the situation of the 9th path. At the bottom of the 3rd path, he met the blood god of the foreign races. That cuttlefish which was as large as the starry sky weighed heavily on his heart. It was also because he had witnessed how terrifying that cuttlefish was that Ning Fan did not dare to underestimate the foreign races. He did not think that he was already invincible in the world. In order to reclaim the 9th path, he still needed to gather some information first. When Ning Fan asked about the situation of the 9th path, the experts of the Eastern Heaven at the scene naturally told him everything they knew. Great Emperor Shen Kong, whose cultivation base had fallen to the 7th tribulation realm, seemed to be trying to please Ning Fan. While toasting Ning Fan, he took the initiative to introduce the situation of the 9th path to him. This made many experts at the scene secretly despise Great Emperor Shen Kong's shamelessness. The things that Ning Fan had done before he became famous had already spread across the Eastern Heaven. Everyone knew that Great Emperor Shen Kong had bullied Ning Fan in the past. Now he actually had the nerve to lower himself to please Ning Fan. Doesn't he feel ashamed? As the saying goes, the river flows east for 30 years and west for 30 years. Don't bully a young man because he is poor. Since younger brother Ning has asked about it, I will tell you about the situation of the 9th path. In the Vermilion Bird Pass, the main pass of the 9th path, the foreign races have stationed 10 million troops. Among them, there are 9 immortal emperors, 1 half-saint and 3 traders of the Eastern Heaven. Younger brother Ning, You must know about the 3 traitors. They are Emohi, Guihua and Dongling. Among the 9 immortal emperors of the foreign races, 5 of them are at the 6th tribulation, 2 at the 7th tribulation, and 2 at the 8th tribulation. The only half-saint of the foreign races is actually related to this myriad saint's pass. He is none other than the myriad saint Dragon King mentioned in the story. This person's abilities are very strong. Ordinary half-saints can't compare to him, especially his 7 heads technique, which is evil and terrifying. Legend has it that once he transforms into 7 heads, even a first-level quasi-saint would not have the confidence to destroy all of his heads. Besides, his heads seem to have a curse effect which can cause damage to the enemies who attack his heads. Whether that 7 heads technique is really that evil or not, I'm not sure. Because we have been fighting in the 9th path for tens of years, but no one has ever seen the myriad Saint Dragon King transform into 7 heads. Everyone felt even more disdainful towards Great Emperor Shen Kong. They thought to themselves that Great Emperor Shen Kong was really thick-skinned. He kept calling Ning Fan younger brother Ning. Was he not afraid that calling Ning Fan this way would shorten his lifespan? However, Ning Fan was not concerned about these minor details. He was more concerned about the myriad Saint Dragon King and the 7 heads technique that Great Emperor Shen Kong mentioned. From the looks of it, this myriad Saint Dragon King seems to be harder to deal with than that one Xingzi. By the way, I have been guarding the 9th path for tens of years. I once found an ancient cultivator's dwelling by chance. It seems to be left behind by the Eastern Heaven Ancient Emperor in the past. Fellow Taoist, are you interested? Seeing that Ning Fan was unmoved by his flattery, Great Emperor Shen Kong suddenly changed the topic and asked with a smile. Chapter 1138. Ning Fan was not interested in the so-called ancient immortal emperor's abode. The helpless thing was that Emperor Shen Kong, who had the title of Deputy Alliance Leader, kept on inviting him and dragging him to the ancient emperor cave abode to take a look. The Void Space Emperor and the others who attended the banquet were equally excited. They invited Ning Fan to explore the abode, and claimed that there were many secret treasures and divine pills sealed in the abode. After Ning Fan goes there, they could give him some of them. This made Ning Fan very curious. Why were the immortal emperors at the banquet so enthusiastic and unanimously invited him to the abode to divide the treasures? Could this be a scheme with ulterior motives? Would these immortal emperors join hands to kill him after leading him to the abode? This conspiracy theory flashed in Ning Fan's mind. Immediately he extinguished it and shook his head with a smile. He had experienced too many schemes in these years. Therefore, whenever he encounters something, he would always think the worst of others. However, the Realm River was in chaos now. These Eastern Heaven immortal emperors would not betray the Eastern Heaven at the same time to plot against him. Therefore, the possibility of this conspiracy theory was not high. He was just overthinking it. The motive of these Eastern Heaven immortal emperors was very simple. They probably just wanted to take the treasures in other people's abode to please him. Or perhaps, there were some treasures in the abode which Emperor Shen Space and the others could not access with their current strength. Thus, they wanted to borrow his strength to a certain extent. After figuring out the crux of the matter, Ning Fan casually accepted the invitation of Emperor Shen Space and the others. However, he did not explicitly promise them which day they would go to the abode. Ning Fan was more concerned about the situation of the battle in the 9th path. He did not want to pay attention to the abode for the time being. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. The weather in the Realm River was clear and refreshing. On this day, the 4 immortal emperors, the Void Space Sovereign, the Shen Space Sovereign, the Qi Camel Sovereign and the Ming He Child, suddenly visited him at the same time and invited him to take a look at the ancient sovereign's cave dwelling. Ning Fan was slightly speechless. Why are these people so interested in that abode? Seeing that he really could not brush them off, he nodded and accompanied the 4 emperors. The abode mentioned by the 4 emperors was not too far away from the Myriad Saints Pass. It was less than half a day's journey by water. The cave mansion was located at the back of the Myriad Saints Pass, within the protection of the Array Formation, and its location was very safe. There was no danger of being ambushed by the outsiders. The cave was located in an independent space. Due to the passage of time, a thin crack in space had appeared not long ago, and the monarchs happened to find it. This was an extremely ancient cavern space that had existed for an unknown number of years. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within it was already somewhat decayed. However, the strange thing was that the might of the formation within the abode actually still retained 20% to 30%, and it hadn't been completely obliterated by the passage of time. It was rather miraculous. In the beginning, Ning Fan was not interested in this ancient sovereign's dwelling. However, after witnessing the uniqueness of this dwelling, his interest was finally piqued. The landscape of the cave abode was a boundless glacier. On top of the glacier, there were 8 enormous icebergs that towered into the clouds. They were like 8 giant guards that stood upright. On every ice mountain, an ancient emperor had once opened a cave abode. This place was indeed an ancient sovereign's dwelling space. However, it didn't belong to a single ancient emperor. Instead, it belonged to 8 ancient emperors. According to the research done by Divine Space Emperor and the others, these 8 immortal emperors should be people from the same era as the Eastern Sky Ancestor Emperor. The 8 of them were fellow disciples of the same sect. They were called the 8 Sons of Water sect by their contemporaries. There seem to be many ancient books of the Eastern Sky that mention these 8 immortal emperors. As for where this title came from, no one knew. According to the records of the ancient books, the most glorious achievement of these 8 immortal emperors was that they once defeated the Eastern Sky Ancestor Emperor, who was a peerless genius using the water elemental divine ability. Being able to defeat an outstanding genius like the Eastern Sky Ancestor Emperor was enough for them to be proud even if they relied on numbers. The 8 Sons of Water sect were quite capable. Unfortunately, no matter how strong they were, they couldn't resist the passage of time. In the end, the 8 immortal emperors still fell in the long river of time. Only 8 cave abodes were left behind, witnessing the vicissitudes of the world. Each of the icebergs was covered with a large number of formations that possessed unfathomable power. As the owners of the 8 icebergs were different, the colors of the formations were also different. The 8 different colors of the icebergs reflected each other's brilliance in this place, making it look rather magnificent. Among the 8 icebergs, the formations of 5 of them had already been broken by Divine Space Emperor, and the others and their treasures were all taken. Unfortunately, there were still 3 that were beyond the capabilities of Divine Space Emperor, and the others. Even until today, they still could not break through the formations. Instead, they had suffered a lot because of the formations. As such, these people began to have their own thoughts. After all, they couldn't take away the treasures of the last 3 icebergs. Thus, they might as well offer them to Ning Fan. Of course, if there were any treasures that Ning Fan did not fancy, they wouldn't mind sharing them with him. Ning Fan ate the meat while they drank the soup. It wasn't a bad idea either. Younger brother Ning has an outstanding reputation. We have admired him for a long time. However, we didn't have a way to befriend him. With younger brother Ning's capabilities, I believe it'll be as easy as flipping your hand to break the formations of the last 3 abodes. As long as younger brother Ning breaks the formations, the treasures of the last 3 icebergs will belong to younger brother Ning if they are useful to him. If it's the things that are useless to younger brother Ning, you, the white-robed king of hell, are exceedingly strong and you have a huge business. Of course, you'll have high standards. I'm sure there are many things that you won't fancy. You should at least let us get some of the soup, right? Divine Space Emperor and the others put on an extremely generous expression, as if bringing Ning Fan to this place was a great bargain for him. This made Ning Fan extremely speechless. He finally understood why these people were so eager to invite him to this place to have a look. It turns out that they want him to do something for them, and then follow behind him to get some benefits. Divine Space Emperor and the others led the way and brought Ning Fan to an iceberg that was emitting black chi. Among the last 3 icebergs, this one had the weakest formations. It belonged to the 3rd son of the 8 disciples of returning water sect. As soon as Ning Fan and the others approached this iceberg, countless black icicles appeared out of nowhere and attacked Ning Fan and the others. Even though those icicles had been around for a long time, they still retained some of their power, which was enough to injure a weak immortal emperor. Even though Divine Space Emperor and the others had already experienced the power of these icicles, they were still a little flustered by them. The Void Space Emperor, Divine Space Emperor, and the Red Camel Emperor were still fine, as all of them were experts of the 7th or 8th tribulation. Ming He Tongzi, on the other hand, was at a disadvantage. He was just a 6th tribulation expert. Even though he was prepared, he was still careless, and one of the icicles broke through his defensive ability and pierced his left shoulder. Ming He Tongzi was greatly shocked. He immediately pulled out the black icicles without any hesitation. Even though he moved quickly, a large amount of black pus and blood still flowed out of his wound. It was extremely rancid. Ming He Tongzi's face also turned pale because of the attack of a mere icicle. He actually suffered quite a serious injury. Even though the power of the formation of the ancient immortal emperors was greatly reduced, it could still easily injure immortal Emperor Doomsday. Is this the difference between the people of today and the people of the past? Everyone, please step back. I'll deal with these icicles. Ning Fan sighed and said to Ming He Tongzi and the others. What he said was indeed out of good intentions. Even though these few immortal emperors wanted to use him to break the formation, he did not want them to suffer too much damage. If these people were injured, the strength of the alliance of the Border River Alliance would decrease. For the sake of the overall situation, he did not mind taking all the dangers in this place for these people. Unfortunately, his good intentions sounded a little harsh to the other party's ears. Little brother Ning, you have underestimated us too much. Little brother, your strength is unparalleled, but we aren't weak either. Why would we be afraid of these black icicles? Don't mention the word step back again. Fellow Taoist, Ming He's injury is just an accident. On the contrary, fellow Taoist should be more careful. These black icicles are extremely powerful. They are one of the ultimate techniques of the 8 disciples of Water Sect. As long as dozens of icicles attack at the same time, even a 7th or 8th tribulation immortal emperor would find it hard to resist. Our chances of success will be higher if we work together. Fellow Taoist, you mustn't underestimate the enemy. Divine Space Emperor and the others frowned. They felt that Ning Fan was looking down on them too much. He actually asked them to step back. Even though the purpose of this trip was to please Ning Fan, which one of them was not a prideful being, who would be willing to be looked down upon by Ning Fan? Ning Fan frowned. Seeing that the 4 emperors were insistent, he no longer tried to persuade them. Facing the incoming countless icicles, he could only raise his tree of 7 treasures high up and brush it for thousands of times. All of a sudden, hundreds and thousands of black icicles were easily destroyed by the light of the 7 treasures tree. The process was too easy. Divine Space Emperor and the others widened their eyes. They were tongue-tied and could not close their mouths for a long time. Just a moment ago, they were blaming Ning Fan for looking down on them. Moreover, an attack of tens of icicles was enough to make a 7th or 8th tribulation immortal emperor find it hard to resist. However, at the next moment, Ning Fan told them with reality that these icicles were insignificant to him. He could destroy thousands of icicles with just a raise of his hand. All of a sudden, the pride of Divine Space Emperor and the others shattered. All of them felt a strong sense of defeat and helplessness. They knew that there was a gap between them and Ning Fan. However, they did not expect that the gap would be so huge. It was like a heavenly moat that could not be crossed between them. It seems like younger brother Ning can also easily break the formations of this place by himself. There is indeed no need for us to take action. The younger generation will surpass us in time. The Void Space Emperor said bitterly, as if he had aged a few million years in an instant. Divine Space Emperor and the others also looked like frosted eggplants. They could not muster up the slightest bit of momentum in front of Ning Fan. Seeing that he had defeated the proud and arrogant 4 emperors of the Eastern Sky with just a casual attack, Ning Fan sighed even more. He did not want to hurt the self-esteem of the 4 emperors too much. He forced a smile and comforted the 4 emperors. Only then did the 4 emperors regain their composure a little. However, the remaining formations were all broken by Ning Fan alone. The formations of the Black Ice Mountain had a total of 19 layers. The first layer was the attack of the black icicles. Ning Fan broke it in just a few moves. The second layer was the attack of the water poison. Ning Fan possessed the power of yin-yang poison. Thus, he was not afraid of this poison at all. On the other hand, Divine Space Emperor and the others were suffering under the attack of the water poison. If it wasn't for Ning Fan's help, some of them would have lost their lives. The third layer of the formation summoned a water giant with a 6 Tribulation Immortal Emperor Realm cultivation base. However, it was easily killed by Ning Fan's 7 Treasures Wondrous Tree. Divine Space Emperor and the others were so shocked that they felt a chill run down their spines. They looked at Ning Fan as if they were looking at a ghost or a god. The fourth layer of the formation summoned a sky-covering giant wave that drowned the entire glacier. The force of the wave was so strong that it almost made the 4 emperors lose their balance. Their magic power was in a mess. Ning Fan, on the other hand, casually took out an unknown black iron needle. With just a point of the needle, all of the waves evaporated instantly. The 5th layer of the formation, the 6th layer of the formation, the 7th layer of the formation, Divine Space Emperor, and the others gradually became numb. The formations that were extremely dangerous in their eyes were all broken by Ning Fan in just a few moves. Ning Fan's endless means were enough to deal with all kinds of situations. It dazzled them and eventually, they were convinced. If it was said that they felt shocked when they first saw Ning Fan's true strength, after seeing it for a long time, they became used to it and felt that it was supposed to be like this. Quietly, Divine Space Emperor and the others changed the way they addressed him. They no longer called him younger brother Ning but brother Ning. When facing Ning Fan, they no longer dared to be arrogant and rely on their seniority. Regarding this trip, they also did not dare to harbor the thought of fishing in troubled waters. In less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, all 19 layers of the Black Ice Mountain were broken by Ning Fan. Ning Fan entered the cave dwelling of the Black Ice Mountain and ransacked it. He found more than 10 bottles of pills, including 2 9 Revolutions Emperor pills. Unfortunately, more than half of their medicinal power had been lost. He also found 3 magic treasures. All of them were half-damaged innate magic treasures. He also found a jade slip which recorded a water elemental offensive ability called the River Burial Technique. After so many years, these pills and magic treasures actually did not completely lose their spiritual power. This surprised Ning Fan. This was considered extremely rare among the ancient cultivators' remains that he had seen. The 8 disciples of the water sect seemed to be very good at preserving things. The half-damaged innate magic treasures could be used to refine divine liquid. Even though more than half of the medicinal power of the pills had been lost, they were still edible. Of course, these pills were not very useful to Ning Fan. Ning Fan had seen the River Burial Technique. It was not a powerful ability. Its destructive power was not even 1/10 of the power of the River of Oblivion. Even if he learns it, it would just be an additional ability that he could integrate with the cross-shaped halo. Ning Fan decided to keep the magic treasures for his own use, and give the pills to the others to share. However, none of them wanted Ning Fan's pills. It was not because these pills were not good. It was because they were unwilling and did not dare to take advantage of Ning Fan anymore. Seeing that the 4 emperors insisted on not accepting the pills, Ning Fan did not force them. He just made 4 copies of the jade slips and gave one to each of them. After that, he ignored the 4 of them and walked around the cave dwelling alone for the second time, trying to see if he had missed anything. Suddenly, he was surprised and stopped in front of a strange ice sculpture. It was a strange sculpture that was carved from profound ice. It was placed in the deepest part of the cave dwelling. He had no idea what it was used for. When he searched the cave for the first time, Ning Fan's attention was focused on the magic treasures, pills and jade slips. Thus, he did not notice this strange sculpture. When he searched the cave for the second time, he finally noticed it. Moreover, he noticed that there seemed to be a pile of weathered grass ashes in front of the sculpture. Ning Fan squatted down and carefully observed the ashes. He found out that they were actually the remains of a praying mat after it was weathered. The sculpture was not finished. It only had the beginning. He could barely tell that it was the sculpture of a woman because her long hair reached her waist. Unfortunately, Her face and body were not carved properly. However, there were still traces of incense power remaining on the sculpture. It was obvious that the owner of the cave had once kowtowed to it seriously. Even though the sculpture of the woman's body was not finished, judging from the general shape of the sculpture, the owner was not going to carve a pair of legs on her lower body but a fish tail. A woman with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish? Aphrodite's voice suddenly appeared in Ningfan's mind. He thought to himself, could it be that this sculpture is going to carve a mermaid? Then here comes the question. Why did the owner of this cave, the third of the 8 disciples of the water sect, want to carve such a statue of a mermaid, and why did the owner want to kowtow to her? Seeing that Ningfan was actually staring at the strange sculpture, Divine Space Emperor and the others asked with surprise, is there something wrong with this sculpture? Could it be that fellow Taoist has discovered something from this sculpture? No, I haven't. I just feel that it's a little strange for a perfectly good cave to have such an unfinished sculpture of a woman. Ningfan answered. What's so strange about it? All of the 5 cave dwellings that we have broken into previously had a similar sculpture of a woman whose face and body couldn't be seen clearly. This woman is probably the master of the 8 disciples of the water sect. That's why they could sincerely kowtow to her. Are there similar sculptures in the other cave dwellings as well? Ningfan shook his head and suppressed the strange feeling in his heart. Then he turned around and walked out of the cave. The moment he walked out of the cave, he seemed to feel that the sculpture of the woman without any facial features smiled at him from behind. It was a bone-chilling smile. He suddenly turned his head and stared at the sculpture with a frown. Is there really something wrong with this sculpture? Divine Space Emperor asked. He checked the sculpture repeatedly, but of course, he could not find any problems. Be careful. I feel that there's something wrong with this place. Ningfan transmitted his voice to him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.